We'll call the work session to order. Carrie, you want to call the roll?
Councilor Pietzold.
Here.
Councilor Smallwood. Here. Councilor Hamlin.
Present.
Councilor Lee. Here. Councilor Exner.
Here.
Councilor Schultz.
Here.
Mayor Pulliam.
Here. All right, everybody, welcome. So tonight we'll do our kind of our standard song and dance. We're going to do a review of tonight's agenda. We're going to now have, of course, that opportunity for public comment during our work session. And then we have a discussion on budget direction and priorities. So first kick off a review of tonight's agenda, consent agenda. On there is our minutes and the ODOT Intergovernmental Agreement. Was there any amendments or questions about either of those two items?
It's not a big deal, but I'm still listed as a board member.
It's coming up as you're a board member on the minutes?
Yeah.
Okay.
Anything else? I thought they looked fine.
Mm-hmm.
Very good. Okay.
It does say that for you.
Thank you.
Then we're going to have, we're going to move to the public hearing for the Bluff, Jonsrud LID. Sounds like staff has an update for us on that.
Yeah, Mike, do you want to just brief them
Yeah.
on the latest?
We got all the remonstrances back, I think, except one or two. And so, it takes 66% of remonstrances objecting to the formation of the LID. And right now we're at 94.6%.
Rejecting?
Yes,
Oh, rejecting?
yes,
Oh, I thought it was 94.4.
no.
Oh.
It's 5.4% for
Or did they collect any signatures?
Yeah, that's what I was looking at.
Did they just not know the consequences of their actions, like price parameters?
Well, yeah, I don't know how it was sold to them when the signatures were being gathered. We had a public meeting on Wednesday at the library that the neighborhood kind of arranged, and so I attended that, and there was some back and forth about, well, I knocked on your door, and no, you didn't. Well, I left a note, no, all that. So
Okay. All right.
there was a little bit, and like some of the first people to turn in remonstrances were the people who circulated the petition. So anyway, so that's
Was that you?
no, that wasn't me. And then, but there was some complaints about the process, and I mentioned earlier our process is kind of antiquated. Posting a notice at the site in two places on the site, and mailing out notices. So I think we did get some good takeaway from that about trying to revise the ordinance to make it a little more friendly, and maybe requiring. We kind of just turn people loose with a petition, and I think maybe we would be better served if we required that the petitioners conduct like a informational meeting for the people in the LID. There was a long gap between when people signed the petition and when they actually, some people were kind of tuned into it and they knew when the engineer's report was being presented, but other people just, they didn't see anything until they got this notice that said $23,000. So that's really what. So I think it was good in that respect. Kind of gave us an idea of some things we need to change in our LID ordinance. And I spoke with David about this last week too. He said most of these LID ordinances are about this, have similar language in this. A lot of people question the 66 versus 34% thing, kind of the reverse majority. And he said that's very common in many city LID ordinances. So we can look at that and get rid of some of the redundant steps in there.
So tonight then, for tonight's purposes, do I even open for a public hearing, or do we make an announcement? Because especially if we get some people here for public comment, do we announce the results and or do we have to go to public hearing in order to table it?
I think what we'll have is the staff report, or you'll open the hearing, Thomas will give the staff report, give you the same news here, 94% against. And then, the council has no discretion if the remonstrances exceed 66%. You got to kill it. If it was the other way around, you would have some discretion. And so, if you want to mention that, maybe that after you get the news on what the remonstrances are, saying, well, we have no discretion the way the ordinance is written. We must, we can't form an LID. And then the issue is, it can't be reconsidered for 90 days. Now, that means the council could start the process over again, but, the recommendation would be, when it's this resounding, it's probably like, we're not gonna do this again until the public comes back to us with some consensus before we go down this path again.
Yeah, go ahead, Drew.
Can you remind us of what it was that kicked this off? Was there a dire need for particular?
No, I think some people thought it would be nice to have sewer, and the way this is set up is, the city kind of does this investigation and comes up with an estimate all on the city's dime. So basically, you get a free estimate, if you get 60% of the people in this area to sign that petition. And so a lot of people said, well, there's no risk at this point, I'll sign the petition. And then they get the estimate, and then it's time to make a decision,
So could it in the future be smaller increments along the way for those that live next to the pipeline?
Well, again, you lose some efficiencies if you build, a public sewer line in an arterial street 200 feet at a time, or 300, whatever, into people's frontage. So, and then that's a big inconvenience to the public, like, what are they tearing up Bluff Road again to put in another 80 feet of sewer line? So it's really, that's one thing that came up in the meeting, and people's drain fields don't fail from north to south, the way the sewage flows, so it would rarely be that convenient. Ideally, it would work out that way, but it doesn't. The person usually farthest away is the one who really needs this.
So in the future, when it does fail, what happens?
Well, there'll still be, they still could put in they're far enough from public sewer that they could put in an alternative drain field, or a sand filter. So, it's not like they would be, but that would take a long time, so.
So in the process tonight, should we talk about the fact, or should we just let it go, that there is issues coming down the road, some of these folks they need to be hooked up to the existing sewer, or redo nobody's failing, right, at this point?
Yeah, we don't have any information on any failing drain fields, no.
But there's no, I'm just trying to think how much discussion we want to go into. If it's gonna obviously be a failure this time, should we just say? done,
Yeah,
or-
I'd just say, if there's more consensus in the future, and the neighborhood wants to start the process again, that would be the way to do it.
After 90 days.
Well, yeah, right, nothing can happen for 90 days, but I don't think the city would want to take it up
Yeah.
after 90 days, after this kind of result.
Mike, when I introduced it, I wanted to talk about the signature process. So how many signatures do they have to collect in order to start this process?
To start the process, you have to, people, that represents 60% of the 60% of the property owners within the area to be, where the district is, the area to be served by the improvement. So, which is a little different, if you have 10 property owners, 6 people sign it, you've got a district, but there's no relationship between the amount of property they represent. That comes at comes at the phase tonight where, they've submitted remonstrances. More than 66% of the people representing more than 66% of the land in the district have said no, and that kills it. So that is kind of confusing when, there's a 60%, it's a majority to start the process, but it's a minority to create the LID, so that's kind of confusing.
Okay. All right, then after that, we're heading into new business. We're gonna discuss a draft of the Economic Development Committee plan. Just a heads up on that, because I was hoping to appoint Jeremy as chair of that. I noticed in the plan it was the chair was going to be voted upon by the members of that committee. So I'm not looking for a battle there. I just want a heads up, that'll be a question for me as that's an option or not. Yeah.
So I think we also, too, in our previous conversations about our boards, that we were trying to not have council members be chairs over boards. So like Jeremy was a chair of Sandy Net, and then we pulled him out of the chair role. So I wonder if, because it's almost like an opportunity for double voting, if that group as chair, if you're making a recommendation or vote on a recommendation, and then you also bring it to council and get a second approval to move it forward. But I think we kind of went through the process of having liaison roles as our roles with council on those subgroups.
Yeah, it's another reason why we've got to eventually have this meeting on our rules. course, that's been taking a backseat just because of staff load and stuff. Because, John, I understand that that's been a past conversation and it's something that I can go around in my head. But quite frankly, there is dissent on that, right, on council. I think there's a variety of opinions on that issue. So we do need to have a work session so that we can kind of do what we usually do, which is kind of some kind of consensus of the council as to how we want to do that. Yeah, go ahead, Carl.
I was just gonna say the same thing, there is some dissent on both sides.
Yeah, right.
So,
Yeah.
but currently, we do have a statement on, what we should follow, even if we have dissent on it, but currently, we do have a decision on it. So it would makes sense, it seems to me, that we would want that selection of a chair happen in the committee itself.
Well, that's how it's currently set up, and what we're going to be taking tonight, at least. Jim?
But maybe it needs to be different than an advisory committee, so that we don't change the process of the advisory committees, but have some other name for this kind of unit.
Yeah, because to that point, right, because, right, because I tend to agree with what John said and what some of those thoughts are for an advisory committee. On this one, I'm looking more for economic recruitment, right, of a certain industry, utilization of opportunity zones, enterprise zones, tourism zones, and working with property owners on potential, like in brownfields and potential for different opportunities. So I'm not necessarily looking for that committee to advise back as much as be aware and have discussions about opportunities in our town and working with business to make things happen.
So, are you looking for more of a commission then?
Yeah.
Shoot, you know. Well, I mean, that's, we have a big topic that we need to talk about here, so let's talk about that tonight. And this is kind of
It's a precursor of what you guys are talking about.
Precursor of what we're gonna talk about, and it
Okay,
kind of
we can
gives
talk
staff
about
a
that.
heads up as to where our conversation's gonna go tonight,
I
right?
think a 4-cent comment
Yeah,
was
please.
that was only changed about 18 months ago. So before that, as long as I've been on council, that was not the policy. So that's just a recent decision.
Today,
So just up front.
Yeah, Jim.
Be nice if it was an ad hoc special committee of the council, so it was treated differently.
There you go.
Do you already see where we're starting to go on this?
About 7 different ways. But
Well, I like what you just said, I really do.
yeah, that's really not a bad idea.
Yeah.
No,
I
it's
agree.
not at all.
Because this really is a skill kind of job, not a committee kind of job, so.
That's right. Yeah, I like it. Okay. Perfect. Then we're gonna go to the PG request for an exemption, for the undergrounding requirement. There'll be a staff report on that, but, basically they wanna go back, above ground into our power lines and stuff, because there's some common sense, and there's already some infrastructure in place and stuff that, we'll have a conversation there. And then proposals for utility rate model, and wastewater SDCs. So that's gonna be basically us approving to move forward with the development of a plan on some things that we can do with our utility rates and stuff as we progress in our wastewater treatment. With that, it was your conversation, are we ready? I mean, we'll have a bulk of that conversation tonight, so, okay. Public, this is a moment for public comment for our work sessions. Is there any public comment at this time? I was gonna say, there's only really one person in the audience, Kathleen.
I was just gonna say, and kind of talking about your topic before, I can see kind of pros and cons of it, like what John said and all. But I also, I just was a little confused as to how many city residents, assuming city council people are on there, there's 3 there.
Yeah.
But just, I haven't been around here for a long time. I've kind of seen the city go from kind of, allowing the Quonset huts and metal pole buildings and things like that on our main street to, more Sandy style and all that. And that was a big fight with a lot of the businesses and stuff. But in the end, I think the city did hit a really good carrot approach of kind of offering grants and all that, and I think that's the way to go. I just, would be concerned if if the majority of the city, of the committee was made up with folks that don't live here, the tendency is to kind of go with more lowest common denominator, easy, business friendly, which for me, to some extent, is code for you know, cheaper, faster, easier, whatever, but not necessarily, you know, better for the city. So that's the one concern I would have, is that, you know, you consider kind of a balance, you know, somewhat of a balance of having some city residents and the city owners. I think there's a huge amount of economic development potential with tourism and things like that, and I think, you know, that's a great way to be going with it. I just want to make sure that, you know, that the residents that, you know, live here are represented as part of that.
So I agree, and you're talking to somebody who is opposed to the Sandy style and now is really happy that it exists, right? So, I mean, I was one of those. So, yeah, we're looking to have equal balance and to make sure that our residents are heard on it. As far as how many people, what's in front of us tonight is to have three represented, no more than three representatives from our council on a committee of 9. And the 3 can fluctuate, right? Sometimes it'll be 3, no more than 3. And also from different industry types. The only other, like, kind of automatic is the executive director of the Sandy area Chamber of Commerce. Or at least that's what's in front of us tonight.
And how many, is it just one resident then? I mean, assuming, obviously, the city council's residents.
Well, I think my understanding is it was similar to what I think the planning commission is, which is it has to be either resident, business owner. I don't think what's in front of us tonight actually had a requirement of residents versus business owners, but that's something for us to talk about. We're gonna have the opportunity to amend this tonight, so we'll take that feedback.
When I read it today, there was a conflict in the description. There's 2 descriptions, and there was just a little bit of a conflict with living in the community and then in the urban growth boundary. So we want to address that.
Okay.
Well, if we move this to an ad hoc committee, some of those restrictions don't really apply so much. This, I would say, if we go that direction, I would hope that our discussion will go around what's the best to make this thing happen correctly. And if it's an ad hoc committee, then some of those rules don't really apply so much. We'll make it right.
Right.
Make it fair, make it representative, and put people in place where we want to. So, just that conversation probably going to happen.
Thanks, Kathleen. Appreciate it. Jen?
Oh, so would David staff this committee?
Yeah,
Yep.
that's the intention.
Mhm.
And from my conversations with Kelly, that's the direction staff's going as well. All right, moving on, budget direction and priorities.
All right, I do have the chief on the phone. Can you hear us, chief?
I can.
All right, we can hear you too. So ideally, it'd be great if he was here, but he is getting some great training and experience at the FBI Academy. So we appreciate him doing that, and he'll be back in just a few more weeks, right, Chief?
Yes, and I'm looking forward to it. I'm ready to come home. Been a long time.
Yep. So tonight, you know, this is a work session, so we don't anticipate any major decisions. Obviously, this is to introduce some topics and get some early input and direction on basically what you want to see us bring back to you in a proposed budget and any other information you need in the meantime. If we should schedule a follow-up, you know, work session just about police services and where the police budget stands. So you know, this is something that staff is working on right now. We're in the middle of our budget process with the staff and department budget worksheets due at the end of the week. So it's very timely for us. But there are some major issues that you know, I kind of walked into and discovered as we're preparing our budget. And I think with a new council, with a lot of new councilors and new mayor, I think it's a good time to check in before we get to the budget committee process and before I submit a proposed budget to kind of share, you know, where we're at and talk about some of these issues and see if we can get some direction on what we might build into the proposed budget. So just as a refresher, this was something that we kind of just showed as a graphic for the retreat. This is showing where our general revenue is allocated across the general fund. And our major topic tonight that we're talking about is police. And police is about 56% or so that we're projecting for the next biennium of that almost $10 million that we pull in through property taxes, franchise fees, lodging taxes, and some other small general revenue sources, but the majority of that is, of course, the property taxes.
So.
Yeah, feel free to ask
So-
questions.
So on that,
Mhm.
and Ernie, back during the campaign, we had when we met for coffee, we had a conversation about, the percentage of general fund allocation that most police departments get in cities. It's somewhere in the back of my mind. I remember 90%, 80 to 90% is the typical number we look at. Is that accurate?
Well, if you look at other cities, like-sized cities in the area, the number is higher than 56. You'd have to each individual one, but you're right. Some of them are in the high 80s and even a little bit higher.
Okay.
Oh, and we can definitely pull together information that looks at comparables. It might be, a matter of looking at not just what general revenue, what property taxes go to a police department, but what is the total size of a police department in comparison to the rest of, an operating budget. Sandy does provide a lot of other services, that some of those smaller communities or communities that we compare to might not provide, like a lot of senior services, recreation, community services, a portion going to the library, economic development.
A full ISP?
A full ISP, but, receiving just a little bit of general revenue support, but, over the next couple of years that will dwindle down. But when I look at this, I don't see something that, stands out besides things like, well, we do have a pool. That's costing some money. We'll talk about that starting next week. So the next slide is just taking that a step forward and showing,
I'm sorry, Carl.
Just
No,
thinking about this, go back to your, there you are. 56%, if we were to look at anything like other cities, let's say the average is 70% or whatever it is, we'd be hard pressed to get another 20% out of what we've already got. I mean, it just seems like it's illogical and reasonable. So to discuss the increasing or decreasing or whatever to with the police budget, it's almost independent of what the rest of the budget is already assigned to, other than maybe something like the pool, I suppose. But I think that's really, we're not going to be able to move that number to 20% more than what it is.
It's a great point. I mean, tonight there's a couple options that I put in the report that has a little some more detail than some of the other options, right? So you're seeing the pie here, and you can't grow the pie unless you do a couple, fees and things that we'll get into. If the pie is static at 9.7, then if you're going to increase, the slice of the pie for police, then you're decreasing in other areas, and that's a hard conversation. Adding fees is a hard conversation too, but the conversation then is what gets smaller, and it's a pretty big chunk too to make up the gap that we're looking at in police.
I can see us increasing a little bit, but taking away from any one of our services what we have today. That's a hard subject to go through.
Lori, did you have a question?
No, that's all I was gonna say is, this is gonna be a tough road, right? But I think if you ask most people in the community, they would tell you that, law enforcement, police presence is a huge issue for a lot of people. So we really have to look at, maybe there's a happy medium in there between really tightening up the budget in some areas and then maybe looking at a fee to fill a gap. So, but yeah, absolutely.
I have a question.
Yeah, Jim.
What about the future potential of property tax growth with new subdivisions, et cetera? How close are we to seeing anything real happening on the ground?
We experience about 5% growth, which is, considering the statute is, basically 3% is what you can kind of bank on with assessed value growth as long as there's not a lot of compression. So 5% is pretty good based on growth, but a lot of that growth is occurring in single-family homes, which isn't the biggest gain that you can have, say, getting a big commercial development or something like that. And when we're adding just 30 or 40 homes here and there, it's growth, but it's not enough growth to really start talking about adding a substantial amount of police officers or planners or other communications in other places. But we do keep an eye on that because that's forecasting our future revenue growth potential. How many pre-apps are we going through? How many subdivisions are in the pipeline? But those things, remember, there's a lag. There's a couple years lag before that comes on. But it's definitely the growth that we do know and see these things starting to complete, and we're going to get the assessed value on the roll is in our revenue projections for the biennium. So then, talk a little bit about why we're here, actually, in the situation we're in. I want to just a snapshot of where the general revenue allocation has been over the last couple bienniums, and then, kind of where we're going. Obviously, I left some cells there blank on purpose because that's what we're in the middle of developing. But what you guys are aware of is that the SDCs contract was terminated after 5 years of serving their community, where we added a couple officers. That was about $1 million in revenue that was coming to the city to provide that service and provide some coverage for depreciation on equipment and overhead for administrative staff and things like that. So when that went away, we kept the officers to serve our community. It's a feedback that we've heard. I think the council was approached a few times about using contingency and one-time revenues to cover that. And so that did help us on our staffing and another school resource officer, but it created this funding gap where that revenue, about $1 million, went away, and now we need to funnel more into the police to increase their size of that pie in order to keep our current level of service.
So on that, I mentioned this to Ernie when we met. I wasn't on council at the time, obviously, but I viewed it back then, and I still view it, that as it was an opportunity for us. When that SDCs contract ended, it gave us an opportunity to kind of strengthen our police department and to get a little bit more officers on the street. And I still view that as a little bit of an opportunity in that regard.
As I understand it though, Chief, we are still, even with the current status of the officers, we're still not at full strength for 2 officers for every shift. Is that correct? Even if we keep all these guys on at the moment?
Yeah, that's correct. But we're not to that point yet. That's been a long time goal of ours. We now it's also we have had one officer go to another agency, and our lieutenant took early retirement. So if you look at it that way, then we've those 2 officers are now they're not working for our city. One of those and one of our people got went into a school resource officer position, so that also helped. But yeah, getting back up to the 2 officers on at all times is going to take a lot more than I think we can do this budget cycle, even with some additional funding. But that's more of a longer-term goal for us. We have decreased that gap with some, let's just say, creative scheduling that my administration and I staff have done. So we can we're kind of squeezing that gap to where at one time it was up to 4 hours, and now it's 2 or 3 hours in a 24-hour period. So we are getting closer with the staff. But yeah, that's a longer-term goal for us. That would take another. I'd like to fill that position, the patrol officer that left, and then we would still need at least another 2 more after that. So that's kind of a longer-term goal. But yes, it's something we're working on.
So Lori Smallwood here has a question for you, Chief Roberts. So, but you're saying that you would need to fill this current patrol position and then hire 2 additional officers to be kind of staffed to be able to do 2 at all times. Is that correct?
Yes, to get 2 on at all times, we would need a minimum of that, yes.
So it's 3 officers.
Yes.
Okay. Lori.
Hey, Chief, what hours are you guys currently running with 1 patrol officer on duty?
We have 2 in the morning. No, I'm sorry. 3 in the morning until 6 a.m. So there's that 3 hours there.
And have you guys identified that as a time because there's less activity? Or is it the least harm?
There is typically less activity at that time of the morning, but the way our schedules work with day shift, swing shift, cover shift, and graveyard shift, and the guys working, they work 10-hour shifts, 4 10s. That is the closest we can get. It's not that it's a safety issue to have 1 guy out there now in our city, I believe. So if you can ask any officer, they're going to tell you that too. Their types of calls, as the types of calls we get, during that time period are typically not the ones that are easily handled by one officer. And what I'm talking about is your, DUI type calls, your domestic violence type calls, things like that. So we rely on other agencies to help out during that time, which they do. But sometimes that can be a long ways away.
I'm gonna go
Chief,
Carl, Jeremy, and then Lori.
Before we get into too much discussion, I believe it's inappropriate for us to discuss when our least covered officers are. I think we should keep it kind of vague in that area. We're kind of already into that business, but just for safety purposes, I'd like to see us stay general when it comes to when we are least staffed.
I agree, let's keep it vague. However, I think this council needs to be well aware of the problem that we create with our lack of staffing. And I want our eyes wide open as we move forward to make these decisions to make sure that we're putting the best public safety unit forward for our citizens. So the transparency needs to start to begin in this regard, I believe.
I just don't want to give the bad guys an opportunity to know when.
I don't think
They
they're
already
listening
know,
to our
Carl.
meeting.
Yeah,
They probably don't listen.
All right.
They're tapped
Yeah,
Whatever
in.
you want to do, but I'm concerned
So-
about that.
Jeremy?
Yeah, so my comments aren't against the police department in any way, so don't take it that way. But I do want to go back in history a little bit. Because when we went and did the SDCs contract, Kim was police chief at the time. And so sitting up there on council, I believe were you on board when we did that? Okay, so
I was.
the three of us were, and we had Lois and Bill and everyone else on there. And one of the main questions we had was, what are we going to do when SDCs goes, we're out of here? What is that going to do to our city? And we had citizens come and testify against that, going, well, let's not do this with SDK because what happens when we do? We were reassured that the people that we were hiring, what we were going to do, Kim had said, as police chief at the time, was we would lay those people off. The people that we'd hire on would be that. That was what was told to us as what would happen when this went away because of budget, right? We only had so much money, and now we're going to bring on stuff to the city's responsibility for SDK, another agency. And so that happened. SDK's process happened, and what did we hear from Kim in the budgeting process was, oh, don't worry, because we have someone going to a different agency, and someone's going to retire, and so we are the two officers there, and we should be equal fine. But that's not what I'm hearing, even as late as 6 months ago, was, no, we need to keep adding more. And I'm not against adding, so don't take them, I'm taking them from purely a budgetary and what was told to the council. Because it was trying to get the council to warm up to, hey, the city's funds being used over in SDK. So that's why I bring that up, because this is what we've heard until now, because we do have the positions down, the two positions, but yet we have a deficit still on top of those two positions that are not being filled currently.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
So
I'm
that's
sorry.
where I'm kind of at a little bit of a loss from being on council, being told these kind of different stories, and then right at the end of the year, what was supposed to be a $5 fee on the thing that we had always planned for years prior to that was for the pool, was then surprised to be added in a big chunk of it to the police. So that was
some
why
of these conversations were starting to happen, I think. So 5 years ago, maybe that was the direction, but then other priorities about we need more officers.
I'm
It
just
wasn't,
looking at
it
where
was
history
recorded,
was.
yeah.
I was very vocal in that meeting as well too, because I
And Lois.
felt like it was a bait and switch
Right.
with what we went out and asked our community about, would you be willing to pay more money for this? And then what we were actually doing with the money on the tail end didn't match or align with what the question was we asked in the feedback sessions. But that doesn't, that is kind of aside from, there's a need for more law enforcement. There's a need to grow the police force. I think it was a convenient opportunity, but I just don't see from a budgetary sense that it really panned out to what we were proposed was gonna happen. And so I think that at the end of the day, I mean, we're obviously having this part of the conversation because of a gap. And a gap that we probably can't afford to fund without increasing a fee. And so how we get there, I think is gonna be the question we'll answer here soon.
I just wanted to let the history know where the council
I
came
appreciate
from and the questions we were presenting to staff back then.
Well, and part of it's about priorities, right? Like, do we want to make sure that we have two officers going at all times? Are you okay with where the police budget currently is when that SDCs contract ends, so where you should just lay those folks off? Or do you want to, knowing where our priorities are and what our goals are for the department, do we want to then view it as an opportunity to shift those folks over? I mean, thanks for the past history, but that's
Yeah.
kind of where we're also at, I think, is.
And those people did get shifted over
Sure.
because
Yeah,
people
yeah,
weren't
sure.
there, right?
That's
So there
right.
was no loss of employment, which is
Right.
great. I'm excited about that. That was a great thing.
But is our police
So where are we at
department, I think the
budget-wise?
question for us though is our department, at the point that we want it to be? And as far as when we're looking at our priorities of our budget and everything, are we adequately, funding a police department that's going to meet our expectations, needs, and priorities for where we are as a community today and where we're going tomorrow?
Well, something that, just to add, kind of how the dynamics of public safety work that you guys may not be aware of too. So if you are, say it's 4 a.m. and somebody attacks you, stabs you, shoots you, anytime there's a weapon involved, there's a drug overdose, there was an attempted suicide, anything like that, fire is going to get dispatched, police are going to get dispatched. Fire will not move in to deal with that emergency medical situation until the scene is secured by law enforcement. So if we have to wait for 20 minutes while somebody is bleeding out on their floor, we wait for 20 minutes while somebody's bleeding out on their floor, and that is not abnormal in this town. I'm here to tell you. It is not abnormal when there is one officer on duty for us to wait 15, 20, 25 minutes, because if they're already detailed on another call, they're waiting for Clackamas County, state police, somebody coming from another jurisdiction, and in the meantime, again, what's the service that we're providing to the public?
John, did you have something? No, but Carl?
Yeah, if you can you go back a couple slides? Because my answer to this one right here, my answer to your question is actually everybody on there, except for us. I'd take us off the list, but everybody on there is underfunded.
Yeah,
Right. So I think we've got a way bigger issue than just police
Yes,
being
sure.
underfunded, because
Absolutely.
we're gonna make compromises around what gets cut or how much we're gonna tax or fee our citizens. And I think the reality is everybody there is needing more, and we've been running on the cheap for a very long time, so we're gonna have to pay the piper.
Yeah, there's some more, factors that I haven't really touched on, we'll get into in the budget, but, we have a huge PERS increase hitting us too. So I'm getting feedback from all the departments that, yeah, they're not getting it as much as they need. Over the last couple of years, there's been some services added too that have put more constraint on the general fund, some senior service, programs, the staff, the aquatic center. The police budget is hamstrung by interfund loan that they're now paying to the transit department, so they have debt service in their department. I think PERS alone hits the police department by over $100,000 for this biennium. General fund is going to be closer to $500,000, and so it kind of leads into the next topic, but a lot of that was paid for by using up our reserves, which is a one-time source, which now we need to rebuild with ongoing revenue.
Before we jump into the next businesses, because I'd like to go on record, is that I think safety of our officers is paramount above everything else. But we cannot go into major debt thinking that we were gonna protect our folks, so there needs to be another way. And we talked about this last time about we're gonna be lean and nice in the past, but I don't know that we can be lean even if we are nice. We have to figure a way. We are a growing community, and really if we're gonna stay up with the growth that is happening in Sandy, we have to be acting like we are a community that can deal with those kind of things. And to be always reactive doesn't cut it anymore. We gotta be proactive, figure out a way. And I guess I'm here, I don't have any answers for you at the moment, but I really think that we need to keep our folks safe. I can't tell you how important that is to me. But we've got to figure out a way to make that funded in a way that is right and logical, makes all the rules and all that sort of thing. And if we have to do some fees that we have never done before, then so be it.
In my opinion, it's a mixture of budget prioritization and additional revenue. John, and then I'll go to Jeremy.
So I think you were.
Jeremy, go
Oh,
ahead. Yeah.
I just want to, I appreciate what you said, Carl. I'm right there. If you look at my voting record for 12 years, I've never not voted for something for the police. But I also haven't tried to make it go from 56% to 80%.
Well, that's not what
or whatever, without
Comparison.
robbing another department's funds
Sure.
that they've reserved. So just want to make that.
I'd like to see what it costs when we're putting the budget together if we added one officer instead of two.
What, to add one officer instead of 2 additional officers?
Right, instead of trying to replace the 2 that are leaving, what would happen if we brought on one?
Consequence.
John?
I was just gonna ask Jordan, are we still in your punchline? You got more to show us with some fee proposals?
Yeah, we do.
Yeah.
So we talked about
A lot of what we're
staffing,
talking about is gonna be it.
but getting more to now, solutions and direction. Councilor Lee, that feeds into, one of the options on the table. The fee conversation has come up before, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. But the other options, we do have 2 vacancies right now. The lieutenant position and a patrol position. The patrol position is under recruitment and I believe under application review at this point with interviews coming up. So sort of in the middle of that, and I know the police department's really excited about that, but it's a staffing conversation, it's a budget conversation, but there are those 2 vacancies that exist. Even with that, there still is a little bit of gap because of all those other factors I touched on already, PERS and the interfunded loans and equipment deficits and things like that. So even with that, we're looking at under every single couch and chair and cushion that we can find. Some of these other options really get a little bit harder when you're talking about a fee and what that means for household and how much revenue we can generate on that. The service conversation is a tough conversation, but that's something that definitely we can get into, and we go back and look at that slide of the pie and looking really into the different services that we provide and prioritizing, public safety versus recreation programming, public safety versus, some of these other programs. The news isn't all doom and gloom. The overall, the budget is, we're experiencing that growth in general revenue. We're providing a lot of great services to our residents, and we are in this kind of stage of trying to get over a hump on a couple different areas. When Sandy Net starts generating revenue, as opposed to operating in the red, they're going to start operating in the black. We'll look a lot better there. We start paying off some of this debt, this interfund loans. Things will get a little bit rosier. Of course, the economy might change by then, but we're just looking in kind of this in-between biennium where we have to replenish, our reserves, and we have to, fix a couple of these issues, and so maybe it's a little bit of a patience game too. But to jump onto the fee, these numbers are very similar to what you saw a few months ago with the proposed public services fee or the 3P fee, and this is numbers that range from $3 to $7 on a utility bill to city residents. I think our count there is like 3,700 or so utility bills. So a monthly fee of $5 would bring in roughly $230,000 for the year, which gets us close to that $500,000 in terms of the gap that we're looking at in the police. So adding fees isn't always the most desirable thing, but given the lean and nice conversations, I thought it'd be good to see what the council's interest would be in exploring that and whether it's worth bringing that forward into the budget committee.
Well, one thing, and we've talked about this a little bit, Jordan, is I would like to have a meeting with our community and see where our community is on this. I know anyone who's on social media sees, or at least I think can take away a sense of feeling that there's a need for more public safety out there. But you also got to do more, I think, than just spout off on social media. You need to show up to a community forum, work session, and testify and tell council why you think that needs to happen, and share some of your personal experiences as to why that happens. I'd like to hear from our officers and some in our fire department. Lori was able to give us a perspective here today, and I've had sidebar conversations with Lori or she has shared different stories with me that kind of opened my eyes a little bit. Nothing against you, Lori, but I'd like to hear that from more than just Lori, right?
Yep.
But really, I don't know if we have a huge issue out there. You just see what you see on social media. You also hear that we've been deemed one of the safest communities in Oregon, right? And so if we're one of the safest communities in Oregon, well, maybe we're doing a lot right? Maybe we're meeting a lot of our budget. So I would personally like, one is explore the fee so that we know it's there, we know the consequences, and when the community comes and talks to us, they know what we're looking at, right? They know, hey, do I feel that my public safety concerns meets a $7 a month increase on my utility bill? I want that to be factored in when they come and talk to us. But I would like to put this out there. I'd like, I'd love to see, I think sometimes we hope that Brittany's our PR department, that we can always say, we'd love to see a story on this, right? I'd love to see us kick out on social media and on some of these neighborhood watch and community pages and stuff that we're gonna do this. But it's time, right? I think it's time if our community really is concerned about public safety and about what's going on out there. They've got to get active in this conversation, and I think we need to be a council that's ready to hear it and provide options and solutions to fix it. And hopefully Chief Roberts is back and able to participate in that meeting as well.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that it would be great to hear from the public and get the public here.
Yes.
We're never going to drag them in here, but those that come in hold a lot more weight than those that sit back on Facebook on their couch, right? But I also want to see more than just this one fee, the other options, just to vet them all up, put them all on the table. What does a levy look like, when we go out for a levy? Most or half the communities out in Clackamas County have levies, Not saying they're good or bad right now, I'm just saying those are some of the options. And what are some of those other options that are put out there? So we get a broad swath of, what are other communities doing? What are our options to do that? To go forward. And a public safety fee is just one of those.
And I think it's time for that because of the meetings we're going to be having over the next couple of weeks. We've, as a council, got to set up our priority and our funding sources and what we're going to put in front of voters, what we're not going to put in front of voters. We've got some big decisions. And public safety, I think, has got to be right in the middle of our conversations around those decisions.
I was just gonna say, I agree, Jeremy. I think anytime you're going after, you have to find creative funding for anything. I think everything's on the table. So I agree completely.
Because that dollar amount is not enough to solve the problem.
Absolutely not.
Carl and John?
Yeah, I agree with what's going on here, but I just got a feeling that with all the things that are coming down on it's amazing to me how much it seems like the last several months we have seen a need for a whole bunch of things. I see the sewer plant coming down on us. I know we have this big need for the pool, and not even talking about the buildings on the community center. And now we've got safety with our police officers, parks we talked about a week ago. It just seems to me like there's a lot on our table. I got to tell you, people that I listen to when I start bringing up the idea of maybe increasing fees, a lot of conversations come around with this. How come we're here at this point suddenly, after many, many years, we've really not had any big increases. Now suddenly it's all kind of on the table. So the message really needs to be put out there.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing I'm hearing a lot is that it is going to be a tough road to hoe to get people to agree to increases and have everything stay the same. We're going to want to know, why am I increasing 10, 15, 20, whatever that number
It's going to be concrete. You got to know.
What is
where
it
it's
that I'm
going.
paying for? What is it?
Right.
Why am I just not? It's going to be tough to put in there and say we're going to want these increases, and you're going to see nothing for it.
So in that, I think, to that point, I agree. I hear you. And I think when we have this conversation of this fee, I think our department needs to be ready to really let us know where that money's going to go, and be ready to tell us why those are the priority spots, right? Like if, what I heard tonight, that, even if we went to $7, we're still not going to be funded at 2 officers a deal, right?
Right.
Then you got to explain to me what's taking precedent over that and why. And maybe I'm not a police officer, right? I'm not trained. So, I mean, I'm sure there's good reasons for it, but we've just gotta hear those and be really comfortable about where the money's going.
I mean, I think some of the direction that would be helpful is if it is a council, policy or whatever, to have, 2-officer coverage. I mean, we can bring back a fee that, after running the budget numbers and which we'll have here in another week or two, to see what that amount is and be able to say, here's a proposal, if it's 2 officers or, and filling those vacancies, that gets us to that coverage. Is it a $7 fee? Is it $8? Is it,
And I just wanna make
$7.50?
sure if that happens, and this is just from
Mhm.
this has nothing to do with past experience in this community, but in conversations I've had with other mayors around the state, is sometimes in these communities there can be a bait and switch a little bit,
Mhm.
where you're saying, all right, you increase the fee here and we're gonna get 3 additional officers, but then what we're also doing is we're increasing the general fund here and we're supplementing other priorities. So we gotta make sure that for passing a fee increase and telling our citizens that the money's going towards 3 officers, that's where transparently, that's where it's going.
And to be totally transparent, I think one of the hard things with this conversation, this proposal, is we have 2 vacancies right now, right? So we're talking about needing additional money just to fund our budgeted level of service, which isn't the actual level of service because of, we're not at full staffing right now. So, it's a hard thing to communicate to the public is, you're not getting your full service right now because of these vacancies, but in order to get that, we need more money.
But that also makes the case.
Yeah, I'm gonna say, on the other hand, that makes it very important for us to communicate that. It comes back down to, and I mean, grab on your time here, but I think it's crucial that we put ourselves out on the table and people hear about it. The question is how are we gonna do that?
Right.
Until we get people really wound up and excited and kind of mad, we don't usually get many people in the audience.
So that's why we gotta educate and have these meetings, have people talking, and we've got to be able to find a way to get these stories out about in a way that's safe, that allow people to know, hey, you know what, we don't have 2 officers going all the time. People need to know that. Right. John?
So I think something I'd appreciate is the full picture, and not just segmented. I know we're gonna have to look at it in a segmented way, but I mean, you just talked about things that people are gonna be expecting if they're gonna pay this additional fee. The reality is with wastewater treatment plant, you're not gonna see the thing that they're paying more for. And so I think they're gonna see things they probably don't love about the thing. Yeah, I mean, if we're dumping into the Sandy River, there's probably gonna be a little more pushback on that. But I'd love to see like overall impact of increases in fees, potential overall impact on increases in fees, how we compare to other communities. And then also recognizing too, we've got something special going on out here in Sandy. I mean, people are moving out here. There's a reason why we're one of the faster growing cities, and we have to recognize that. I mean, we could price people out really quickly by having astronomical fees. But I think we have to kind of look at like we should be having more of premium services, and we should be charging more of a premium to get those services too. And then when people can see and feel like I feel like this community is providing me value for whatever my service is, and just know we're going to college. There's 17 community colleges. We set tuition rates. We're cognizant of where everybody else is. We're also trying to understand we can't bump it up too high or we're going to lose students as well too. So I think we have to do the same thing as a city and just recognizing where that value breaking point is, to where it's overpriced and we've upset our community, versus we're reaching that goal of what we're trying to provide for high quality services at a premium as well too.
All right, so it's 6:53, gotta go quick. I see you, Carl, but I'm gonna go, Bethany hasn't spoken yet. I wanna go to her.
I just, to what you were just saying and looking over the options that Jordan laid out for us here, I feel like everything is on the table. The one that I don't see as on the table is the reducing other departments' revenue. Like, to me, I feel like if we're doing quality of life stuff and people are seeing what we're doing for them, if we're reducing these other departments, then I think that's not gonna work, so, but that's my opinion on it.
Yeah, when we have to make decisions like this, though, I would say, like, the staff reports, they're important. They're important to get up, but they're both important to get updated, and they're important for us as a council to read and review. Because when we're making these decisions, we gotta know what's going on in those departments, and back to the value and what you're getting for the buck, you gotta see what's happening. I have a comment later today, our community services, that was an awesome report. I don't know how many people read that, doing a lot of really neat things, right? So, but now I know that. because it was on there and I was able to see it. Did you have something, Carl?
I'm going to pass at the moment, because pretty much covered by both these two
Thank you.
Did we get done with this, or do we need to come back to it? Because there's more on that list
On what?
of the,
Yeah, more
topics
slides?
3, 4, 5, no,
Yeah, I mean-
what you had
I
in the packet.
apologize.
It's okay. I mean, the intent of this was really like to introduce these topics and see if there was interest in pursuing further. And honestly, the Councilor Hamlin's comments, I think what we thought was the chief, when he's back in town, would have a bigger conversation about policing services and where we're at. But just really quickly, I did want to touch on these others as just introductions to these drivers. I already talked about the reserve policy. This is really our rainy day fund. Where we're going to land on that, I think, is a policy that's around 5% of operating budget. I would prefer closer to 10. I think it's a process that we'll get there in a couple of budget cycles, but that kind of gets us where we're at. We were for this biennium, and it was a driver because it's causing us to use general revenue to replenish the reserves that we depleted over the last couple of years. Related then to all this is the communications position, and after having a conversation about the pie and money, this was a council goal that I'm struggling to find the funds to achieve that, and that's where maybe as a team we think creatively about how we can accomplish some of those goals about communicating better to the public. Given all these projects and priorities and things that we're working on, I think it's very important. So we just need to look at other ways to do that perhaps. So that kind of led into looking at some other revenue options. That was also a council goal. I put in there one thing some cities, about 30–40% of cities in Oregon do, is charge their own utilities a franchise fee. And this is something we can explore through the rate model that you're going to approve a contract, I think, tonight for. So if we could just plug that into the model to see what the impact would be on rates. In some cases, it might not be much. In other cases, it might be deferring some capital. In other cases, it might actually mean a rate increase of $1 or something like that. But really, this is to reflect the general fund owns the right of way on behalf of the public, and utilities, if they were a separate entity, they'd be paying for that. So we really treat that the same way, that they need to pay the general fund and pay the city for the use of that right of way. So it's another way to generate some of this revenue for other programs and services. But that's just an idea I wanted to toss out there. I didn't mean anyone to make a decision in the last minute on that, but if there was any interest in pursuing that in terms of the budget, it'd be helpful, to know. But.
And real quickly, it's a great idea. I also think there ought to be other places that we could look at to save money.
Mm-hmm.
There may be something out there that the public can be part of. I'm thinking everybody in the city ought to be on low flush, low shower, low whatever, low water use. That
Mm-hmm.
would help us. Some areas, and maybe some other things that we could look at too, that are not just increase the money,
Mm-hmm.
but also decrease the expenses.
I think we got some great topics for the budget committee meetings.
Awesome. All right, we'll break until 15 minutes.
Okay, I'm just eating.
They're all going to give us a timeout brief.
Is it just me or is it cool?
It's always
You
cold,
know, when it-
Lori.
It's always cold in here, but when I first got in here, it was really warm in
okay,
this
and
room.
now it's really cold.
And the temperature, I think, changes at, 6 o'clock, 5 o'clock, and
Yeah, it's on a preset where it
Preset.
turns, yeah.
We should get a fireplace in here.
Yeah.
Meet Sandy style.
That's right.
Rustic lodge.
Do the pledge. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So I'm going to start with something a little bit different this evening. I'm going to call for a quick moment of silence for the passing of our Oregon Secretary of State, Dennis Richardson, who is a personal friend of mine, as well as our kind of a pioneer in Oregon, our first female elected Secretary of State, Norma Paulus, who also passed recently. So if you wouldn't mind, all please. All right, Carrie, will you call the roll?
Counselor Petzold.
Here.
Counselor Smallwood.
Here.
Counselor Hamlin.
Present?
Counselor Lee.
Here.
Counselor Exner.
Here.
Counselor Schultz. Here. Mayor Pulliam.
Here. All right, thank you everybody for joining us this evening. We generally start these meetings with a quick review of the agenda so that everybody understands what's going on tonight. Our first item before us will be our consent agenda that we'll review and most likely pass through. We will then open for a public hearing for the Bluff, Jonsrud, LID district that might be opening. Just before that, I will open for a public comment period for items that are not that. So you're here, if you're here to discuss that project, please wait until we open up that public hearing and then we'll take testimony at that time. Then under new business, we'll be looking at a draft proposal for a newly formed economic development committee. We have a request from PGE for an exemption from the undergrounding requirement. And we have proposals for the utility rate model and wastewater SDCs. With that, is there any changes proposed for this evening's agenda? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to go to public comment. This is the time for public to comment on items either on the agenda or not on the agenda that are facing council. Again, though, if you're here to discuss the LID development, you'll have your time during the public hearing for that. Yeah, go ahead. Please approach the podium, say your first and last name, your address, and you have up to 5 minutes. Welcome.
Hello, my name is Karen Poplar, Leah Karen Poplar. I have some packets for you. I have information on them.
Remember your address, please.
18015 Davis Street, Sandy, Oregon.
Thank you.
And I am here to ask for consideration for allowing manufactured homes on private lots in the city. My argument is that there's a shortage of affordable housing in the city. Manufactured homes are built to very strict codes determined by HUD and could meet that need for low-income people in particular. The drawbacks for those seeking such shelter by living in manufactured home parks are substantial, the largest two of which are constant rent increases and the lack of rights as regards the land of the home the lack of rights to the land that your home sits on. At any time the landowner chooses, they can sell the property out from under you. And it's a huge cost to move a manufactured home if you can even find a place to move it to. There are several cities that allow manufactured homes on city lots. And I have included 2 of those codes in my packet of information, as well as laws from Oregon statutes regarding manufactured homes, affordable homes, which I think that we're falling short on meeting here. I think that one of the other considerations the city should be looking at is that a home sitting in a manufactured home park pays between $300 and $400 a year in taxes because it's real property. If it's sitting on a city lot, it pays the same as any house sitting on a city lot. And so therefore, you collect substantially more taxes from that taxpayer. Both taxpayers are using the same amount of city services. And so I think that that's a strong argument in favor of allowing this. My own personal reason for asking this is because I live in a tri-level home. I'm getting older. It's harder and harder to climb those steps. And one of the problems with Sandy's popularity is that you just can't afford to get into a house, especially if you're an older person. Several of my friends have had to move away from Sandy who had settlers who pioneered here because they couldn't afford real estate in Sandy anymore. And these are people who volunteered in the community, who were really a resource for this community. So I'd like to have that considered. I have made copies also for the Planning Commission, but they told me I should come to City Council first, so that's what I'm doing. And I thank you for your consideration. I hope it's something you'll review the material and really think seriously about.
Thank you. Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you for the packet. Oh. Any other public comment? All right, seeing none, we're gonna move on to the consent agenda. Discussion? All right, looking for a motion.
I make a motion that we approve the consent agenda, but change the Bethany's title from board member to
Looks like she
counselor.
did already. Yeah.
Here, is already fixed? All
Yep.
right, great.
Yep.
So,
Motion to accept consent agenda.
I'll second.
Motion by Counselor Peetzold, a second by Counselor Lee. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
aye.
Passes. All right, so moving on to the public hearing. I will open the public hearing to consider public comment on the proposed Bluff Jonsrud Local Improvement District at 7:09 p.m. First, I will call for any conflict of interest from the hearing body. Do any of our counselors own property within the boundaries of the proposed LID?
Nope.
Okay. So before we go to the staff report, one thing I did want to mention on how we got here today, and it might be kind of a portion of your staff report, is we did have some community members that went around and created a petition where they had to garner over 60% of the property owners in order to put it in front of council. So just to kind of make this project clear, this was not an initiative of council where we decided to move forward with an LID project. We actually had citizens that were active in wanting to kind of get this put in front of us. The way this proceeds is if there's 2/3 of the community that would be affected that decide that they do not wish to create this LID, then the decision is not on ours as council. It just simply, it goes away. It is turned away at that point. The only way in which we would decide the future of the LID here this evening, if there's underneath that 2/3 requirement. You may remember at a past council meeting, we made the decision to contact all of the residents via certified mail. So it looks like we have some folks here that received that. And just so everybody here knows, that was really important to us as council. We wanted to make sure that we did our due diligence so that you would have the opportunity to come and speak to us tonight so we could hear you out before we made any moves that could affect you. So thank you for receiving that and then coming here tonight to let us know your thoughts. I'll go to the staff report. Jordan.
All right. So this process was kind of new for us. So as the homeowners found out, this is kind of there were some bumps in the road. Some people weren't notified until the engineer's report was approved and we sent out the public notice, and some people didn't know anything about it. So that was something we're going to work on, the ordinance, and kind of revising that to make this run a little bit smoother. So the total area was 416,864 square feet, and the objections that came in was 394,512 square feet, 94.6%. So overwhelmingly a no vote from.
So we're beyond the 2/3 that have said
well
no.
Beyond.
Yes. So 93% said that they wish not to have it.
94.6.
94.6.
Yeah.
I read something nearly 95%.
Yes. There's
Yes.
one holdout.
Yes. Okay.
Or one no vote, I should say.
Okay.
And our recommendation would be not to form the LID, which is kind of, and I think you can reconsider this in 90 days as part of the ordinance, but we would recommend not doing that unless we hear back something different from the neighborhood.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So with that, everybody who's here to speak about that, please do understand that we are now beyond the 2/3 threshold, so this will not be advancing forward. But we are still opening up for public comment if anyone wishes to come to the podium and speak to council. If you wish to, please say your first and last name followed by your address, and you have up to 5 minutes.
Or a free pass out if you heard what you needed to hear.
Yes. Yeah, it's pretty, kind of is what it is, right? Yeah.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
I'd like to make a quick suggestion, and I don't know
Yes.
if that would be willing to talk about it, but if there was some processual reasons why it wouldn't have gone forward for you, I suspect that you're part of the no's, so I don't know if that would be something you'd like to respond to, how the process didn't go the way you would like to have seen it go, if that was one of your reasons for saying no. I'd love to sure hear that as well. Okay? All right.
Okay, so moving on, I'll look for a staff recap. Basically, the recap is that you recommend that we don't move forward, correct? Yeah, okay. Discussion. Oh, yeah. We'll close the public hearing, and we will, discussion. All right, looking for a motion to close.
I would so move.
Second?
Yeah, there's a motion by Councilor Lee, a second by Councilor Hamlin that we close the public hearing and decide to not move forward with the project. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, moving on to new business. So first item is the draft of the Economic Development Committee resolution. Jordan.
David Snyder.
Mr. David Snyder.
Yeah, as David walks up here, I'll just do a brief introduction on this topic. Had some great questions and discussion
Thanks,
at
Tom.
your work session at 6 p.m. And hopefully we can vet out some of those issues and get some more direction. This was our first attempt at drafting a resolution to kind of reflect what your conversation was on February 4th when you talked about the formation of this new committee. And we decided to go the route of a resolution as opposed to an ordinance to give a little more flexibility in how this committee can be operated, a little bit different than, say, an advisory board, and a little bit different than a commission like a planning commission or even a budget committee. But looking forward to the conversation council has and some feedback so we can bring back either a resolution or an ordinance or even direction to form an ad hoc committee as a possible choice. So with that, I'll turn it over to David to give a little bit more of a summary of this proposed committee.
So, as City Manager Wheeler stated, we looked at some of the all the things that you guys had mentioned during the discussion and kind of put them together in a draft resolution. That includes the direction that you gave us on you prefer to see 9 members. 3 of those members should be city councilors. No more than 3 of those members should be city councilors. The chair and vice chair shall be elected from the membership. Sandy Area Chamber of Commerce shall have a seat on the committee, and members shall be recruited from I'm sorry, I'm having a little bit of difficulty tonight. Members shall be recruited from key business sectors and fit the following criteria: live within Sandy, owner-operate a business within Sandy, or owner-operate or own commercially or industrially zoned property in Sandy. So we've kind of put that together in the draft resolution. After the whereases, we start again with the 9 members. We did note a difference between the inaugural members and how things would be approached in the future. The inaugural members, for speed and efficiency, we figured that, or you had directed us that those should all members should be appointed to begin with, and then there will be and then after that those inaugural appointments and the inaugural term is up, or if somebody quits the committee, then at that point staff will develop some sort of application process and criteria in order to add a new member, and that will be based on what you guys want to see.
So a question on that.
Yes, sir.
So kind of what I took from that discussion was that we were going to kind of be looking to appoint, like go and literally recruit and ask people to
Yes,
join
correct.
the committee. Are you saying you want to do that just in the forming stages and then have an application process,
Well,
or would we continue to do that?
Yeah, there was some discussion about wanting to have an application process after after those inaugural committee members were seated. But we don't have anything put together at this time, and for the because of the speed to get the committee seated and up and running. You had stated that it would be best if we appointed those to begin with.
Yeah, Jordan?
Just one thing we're trying to keep in mind too is, after this thing is formed and it's going for a couple of years, what happens as it keeps going, right? Is this something you just want for a couple of years? It does, a defined, project or defined, task that you want it to do, or is this something that you want as an ongoing advisory board? I got the sense it was the latter, that this is a new city committee that's going to be in, perpetually moving forward. And so then we had to think about, okay, we get this thing initiated. This council has, the most input into the success of this committee starting out, and then what happens beyond that? You want to look at a process that's more similar to how we fill our other boards and commissions, where we go through an application process and it's the full council involved with a formal appointment, as opposed to the recruitment and selection of individual business owners and property owners.
Okay. Were you done, David? I'm sorry.
Oh,
I asked a question in the middle of your...
No, it's all good. Moving along. So, past that, we also determined, or you guys had also told us that you were looking at 4-year terms. And in order to stagger the committee so that we don't have everybody coming off the committee at the same time, we figured we'd take half of those people would initially have 2-year terms. So then every 2 years we would have new seats being available, just like we do the council and planning commission, all that. Committee membership shall include voting members from the following stakeholder groups. Again, this is all from what you guys had said you wanted to see. No more than 3 members of the city council. I think currently we have 3 members of the city council interested, so we're good there. Owners of businesses established within city limits, commercial or industrial property owners. You expressed a desire to see 1 seat reserved for the Sandy Area Chamber of Commerce, and I'm sure the chamber would appreciate that. And then no more than 1 at-large member who resides within the urban services boundary of the city of Sandy. So somebody who receives services from the city but may not necessarily live within city limits.
Yeah, and I think there was a conflict between the staff report and this, whether
Correct.
it's a city resident or a resident of the urban services boundary, and either way, whatever you're comfortable with.
Yeah, I'm comfortable with either. I was just going to bring up the discrepancy there, but also can we define a little bit more on the urban services boundary? Is that urban growth boundary, or is that?
That's what I was assuming.
Or because services sounds like whether you got sandy net or water, which can go way outside of that because it's a service from the city. So
Right.
Can we have clarification on that? Is it urban growth boundaries or what it may be? I mean, I don't have an exact opinion right on that, but I would like a clarification.
I'll play the new card at this point. I don't know how many residents or how many customers we have outside of that boundary of city limits, but I know that we do, in terms of utilities and things like that. So it does change sort of that calculation, because you may have some utility customers, but they're advising, on economic development policies and stuff that could be funded by property taxes or urban renewal and things like that, that they're maybe not have a financial stake in. So that's where you might want to think about that policy of, do you want just residents who are paying taxes and, a part of the city limits, as opposed to someone who's outside maybe just getting one service or.
But you also limit your talent pool too, right?
Exactly.
Right.
So I almost look at it as trying to be flexible and allow for some individuals who are outside of the city, but build some parameters around that of like how many, right? For example, you put what, no more than 1 on this, right? So I don't know if that's the answer. Maybe it's 2. Maybe it is 1. But I'd like to be able to at least have the opportunity to recruit if we find the right person to serve on this that might live in our community, spend every waking moment when they leave their home in our community, cares and loves about our community, but just doesn't happen to be in city limits. I would hate to turn our back on somebody that could really bring a lot to us. Right.
A company that comes to mind is Everfresh Fruit Company, who's right outside, and I believe they're a water customer of ours.
They are a water and an internet customer.
Yeah.
Well, why, we're like linked, because when I was saying that, that was exactly what I was thinking about, so, yeah, that's exactly right, yeah.
Yeah, I just want to add my admission about that one. I think that we have a number of people within the city who have limited numbers of services. I can think of some of the island people who, does that sound right? Not from Hawaii, they're just not inside, island, I said, not inside Hawaii, they are not, they're inside our city and not inside our city limits. So those are some people that could be affected by that, plus those fringe folks who are just outside our city boundary or urban and have a limited number of services. I think there's a lot of possibilities, a lot of desirability, including those folks. So I think services makes sense. The only thing I was questioning is we have people who are receiving wireless sanding net, aren't we? Who are quite a ways outside of the city, miles.
All the way from Boring to halfway up Welton.
How far do we want to go that way? I guess that would be the question is, one service, maybe a couple miles outside of our boundaries. I guess we could evaluate those as they come in and see if we get some priorities if we don't get enough. But that seems like a long ways.
Yeah. And what kind of parameters do we think? 2? No more than 2? No more than 3?
You know, like miles, you mean?
No, individuals.
Oh,
Because
okay.
I'm going back to our work session earlier this evening and Kathleen's comments, right, which I think were spot on as well, that we want to make sure that we have the right mix, so that we don't necessarily have folks who are making decisions that are going to affect our tax-paying residents, and having, you know, kind of a sway of people that, while I think if they're in our servicing area, they're invested, but maybe not as invested as people who live in our city. Yeah,
Yeah.
Councilor Lee?
I would say no more than 2, and they would have to have 2 city services or more. So they really represent us.
I was going to say 1, it didn't make any difference, but either one kind of works for me.
I would just, to that, I hear you, Councilor Lee. My concern there is if the committee and those of us on council find someone that we get really excited about, I worry about setting such parameters that, where we can't go and get that person because we've built so many rules around whether or not we let that person on. That's just my thought there. Councilor Hamlin?
Are we, aside from the planning commission, do we have other vacancies on our committees? So we don't have a fully staffed committee. This one's exciting, and I'm hopeful. We've kind of front loaded that it'll be 3 counselors on there as well too, but I would just encourage us to be as flexible as possible, just given how challenging it's been to fill other seats. So,
Councilor Pietzel.
Yeah, and planning's not really here, but one of the things, I'm sorry, you're in that department, was we expanded that even on the planning commission. I think Hollis was the exception for that.
Right.
Living outside.
Right.
That those policies and rules were changed because of that. We're having a hard time funding it. So I agree with Stan in the fact that having a little bit more flexibility on, especially as we start the program up, is trying to really gain the best talent in our areas. I don't want to be going off to Portland to bring someone in, right? That's not what I don't think the intent was that. But right outside our urban growth boundary, someone brought up an example of Everfresh, just as an example. They are right outside the urban growth boundary, but they are. So one of the things that we did talk about before was even having from the urban growth boundary so many miles outside of that. 2 miles was one example that was brought up when we were discussing this back with the planning commission and other things. So those are other options to be able to kind of piggyback on. I don't want to add up a lot of different variables because it can be very hard to check off all these boxes when trying to get that set up and going. But
so then I made a comment at the work session about the ability to appoint the chair, and I'm looking for a bit of a compromise with the staff proposal there. What I would like is I believe that in the formation of this committee, that there's a lot of council direction and leadership that we want over this committee as it gets formed. kind of to the point of recruiting the original group and then going out to an application process. So perhaps something where we have the ability, and it's, I mean, I announced it, there's no, it's, I mean, I would like and prefer our council president, Jeremy Peetzel, to be the first chair of this committee. I would look to maybe have him be the original chair, and then maybe after 2 years or something, where we then have the vote, go to this process of a vote on the membership. Councilor Smollett?
Yeah, so again, kind of as we discussed earlier, then, under the current rules, maybe this particular group would be better served as being a commission and not a committee, or an ad hoc, or something in those parameters, which would give us the latitude to do that, and still stay within our current rules.
Yeah, Councilor Exner?
A couple things. One is, I think as a council, if this is something we want to do, why not make the exception? And if we want to use this as an advisory, I have all the confidence in the world of Councilor Peetzel, and I think that he'd be a great chairman of this one. Why not just vote, change the rules? But currently the rules do say no. So I would be in favor of making a motion to change it, or to make the ad hoc thing work. Either way, but let's stay with the rules. I'm a rule kind of guy.
So I agree, let's stay with the rules, and I don't think I feel comfortable with the council without more discussion, changing a rule like that here tonight. I'm more to the side of what Councilor Lee mentioned earlier, which was to make this kind of an ad hoc committee.
Yeah.
And then revisit that at another time when we go over our rules in general.
Yeah, realizing we have a desire to relook at those rules, and there's a lot of things to be changed there.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would fully in favor of that. Number two is this is a fairly important change in the way the council is going to be doing economic development. And admittedly, I want to go out as far as possible to get as many members on this that really want to be there and that have that kind of ability and skill. If we don't find, we said 9, I think was the number we're talking about here.
Yeah.
If we only find 7 that have fit all these criteria, and I believe need to be interested and skilled, and work with the committee and be part of that, strongly part of that, I'm not so sure we need 9. So, I think that the one outside of the service area, or inside the service area, outside the city limits and urban growth, is more than enough.
So I originally said, I'll go to you here in a second. I originally had said 7 myself, and then in the meeting I had with Jordan, he goes, now remember, 3 of them come from your council.
Right.
Sure.
Right? So then now we're a committee of 4 in addition to the council. So that's the only thing there. So I want to be like Councilor Lee.
Oh, I was just going to suggest that we say up to 9, and if we only have 7 to start, fine.
Right.
Yeah.
Sure.
Could be
We do want interested people. We do want
Yes.
folks who are going to make a difference in this one.
Committed.
Because we have some big issues to go after in this guy.
Yeah. So to start to kind of wrap this up, Jordan, do you need like a motion and a vote from us on how to move forward? It looks like we have some recommendations. A couple of them off the. Go ahead.
Good. You can
Yeah. What are you looking for from us? Because I'm hearing good with the 9. Hearing that we start with going the ad hoc direction, going to larger servicing district, to not be any more than 2 of those members being from that larger servicing area. I mean, do you want to do that with some motions, or?
I think at this point, just direction,
Okay.
head nods is helpful.
Yeah.
I do have to look into the ad hoc and see what the parameters are for that. If there's anything in the council rules or code or charter that outlines what the rules are and how you set up an ad hoc committee versus a board and commission. There might not be a big difference, but
there's got to be something though, because
Yeah.
past Mayor King, for example, during the interview process that we were lucky enough to have you appointed, a bunch of different interview committees and stuff. So there's obviously some kind of precedent for some ad hoc committees that go and actively do things.
yeah, and it probably looks less formal than what we did with this resolution, to be honest.
100%. Yeah. Oh, it's very formal.
Yeah, that makes it a little bit easier, obviously. But to touch on the at large, there's a couple outcomes we're trying to achieve there. One is just getting more public input from, say, even just a resident that can provide that voice on this committee that, hey, I'm a customer, I'm just someone who likes to go get my coffee in the morning, I don't own a business or run a business, I don't know anything about that, but here's what, maybe the input I have from just a person that lives here and uses the businesses, as opposed to just the business owner's voice or the property owner's voice. But I think the other thing, by having 2 at-large and being able to do that recruitment is a great idea, because you may have people that live here but own their business in another community, or have great knowledge, or a consultant business or something like that they just operate in a different community in the area or something, and can really provide a lot of value to you guys. So I think it's good to have that flexibility. But what I'm hearing is ad hoc committee up to 9, a couple at-large members. The initial, or I guess we don't need to worry about initial versus non-initial, but appointed by the mayor, the chair, the leadership of this committee appointed by the mayor, and also the committee members themselves would be appointed by the mayor, and then I assume confirmed by the entire council.
Yeah,
Okay.
good with that. Yep.
So just a couple things on number 3, mission and duties. Just to make sure everybody's reviewed that in the context of what this group is going to be doing and how they're serving council, or if they're running more independently. And then I also think too, the line between David's position, Director of Economic Development, and this committee as well too. You're not director?
I'm not a director.
Help me out with your title then.
Economic Development Manager.
Economic Development Manager. I just gave you an upgraded title.
Thank you. I appreciate
Not
that.
official. Strike that from the records.
Needs no extra money.
So close.
But the reality is we've got, Planning Commission, Planning Director. There's a relationship there again with this Economic Development Manager, this committee or ad hoc, and just kind of understanding what that relationship looks like. But it's almost like a triangulated relationship with us as well too. The Planning Commission really only involves us when needed.
Right.
So we're not like on their day-to-day as well too. And I just think the ask for this committee, regardless of what it ends up being, is pretty substantial for what we're asking them to act as agents in a sense for the city as it relates to identifying incentive programs and trying to not necessarily negotiate businesses coming into town, but in a sense try to incentivize or identify potential opportunities as well too, and just how that mixes with operational functions for the city.
Well, perfect example is the meeting that we had here with Clackamas County Economic Development, right? Where we're looking at properties and we're dreaming about the potential of these properties and the economic development that could come in and what it means for jobs and possible incentives to bring them in. That's the kind of meeting I would like to see our economic development, committee have those folks come in and identify properties and what the challenges are and what the opportunities are with those and the zoning challenges, and then say, all right, so let's dream. What do we want to see on there? And then take that next step and say, now let's contact that business. Let's get a meeting. Let's see if they have interest in our community. Who here, does anyone on this committee have a contact or have interest in making that outreach? And that's kind of what I'm looking for in that committee, just to kind of bring that full circle. I'll go to Councilor Pete Sold and Councilor.
Yeah, I agree with you on that as well. That's where I see that committee going strongly in. But in all of that, we need to have really clear and direct and strong staff pushing those things as well, and being able to feed that group and have the time to feed that group that information, that research, that stuff on the back end of it, so that group is successful in doing that. Yeah. So there is that time that will need to be allocated for that group.
Well, and our membership to Greater Portland, I think, gives tools and stuff to David too to help with, opportunity zones, enterprise zones, what those are, what those mean, what all of that.
Can Jordan respond? Because I think he was going to respond.
Yeah,
thanks.
I like to be honest about all this. So I appreciate the point from Councilor Hamlin about the staff interaction. I think where I would be concerned is this committee that is going to be chaired, and there's going to be 3 city councilors that are directing direct staff work. Whereas this committee is an ad hoc of the council that is reporting to the council to make recommendations. So I'd be a little uncomfortable if the outcome of this committee is they're directing our economic development manager to do work. Now, I'm willing to have a pretty long leash on stuff like that. Like, I think we're all in concert on what our goals are, and David's good about talking about workload and capacity and things that we can do. But I just want to be careful of that line where, David, you shall go and do this.
It's totally valid. It's totally valid.
That's where my concern.
Yeah. So how do we? We don't have to come up with all the answers tonight.
Turns into 2 supervisors for the economic development manager, and then it's kind of who do you listen to? Yeah. And so it gets confusing.
So try to think through that. Yeah.
So part of my reason for raising my hand was in the same area. I'm thinking that, and I thought that the reason for only having 3 city council on it was that we would not be able to make decisions that committed to things like monetary stuff without having to involve the rest to make a quorum of some kind, and also to start manipulating, is that the right word, staff to do things and so on, other than what we normally would do. I'm aware that each one of us have a little bit of desire to go into Jordan and say, I can see this thing happen, and then if I can figure out a good connection there, make that happen. But admittedly, the 3 of us are fairly excited about this particular thing, and admittedly,
we're not type A's though.
Yeah, I know.
I'm a type C.
Nobody's going to make any changes in that area. But I think there is a fear in my mind that we will be roaring down the road and we'll be dragging David or Jordan or some other staff in there. But
It's
I
valid.
think we should be able to listen to our own consciences and say, okay, we're about to cross the line, even though we see an opportunity.
Councilor Lee.
Yes, what I was concerned about was reporting back to the council, because now our committee liaison reports are pretty far and few between, and we don't really talk about them. I think in this particular case, the council itself needs to hear a lot about what's going on and discuss it.
I agree. And are they going in the right direction? All
Right.
of that.
Right.
Especially since it's new.
Yes, Councilor Pete.
So when I talk about the staff support in that, let me clarify on some of that, because I think some of it may have been taken out of a different idea. But is when I've been appointed the chair before and those type of things, I've had really strong staff support and being able to get all the legwork, the back end stuff together. When I'm talking about that, binders and printing and typing it all up and getting that going forward for those meetings to happen, right? Some of that stuff is very needing to make sure we have, right? And from one session to the next meeting, they're being able to put those things together, those packets and those things as well, and some of that information that needs to come back, as we all have outside jobs, and everyone on this committee would also have either outside jobs or retired in playing all pickleball or something and don't have the time to do that themselves. But so I want to make sure that that was part of what I was talking about in that as well.
Councilor Hamlin.
I'm not going to jinx us by saying this, but do we have quorum issues if we were to have a vacancy on council?
I don't think so. It's enough to have 4 to make a decision, because even at 6, that's the 3-3 is a tie. So you'd have to have 4-2 instead of a 4-3.
Cross that bridge.
Nobody's allowed to leave.
That's right. We're going to be looking very strongly.
All right, so are we ready to move on to the next item on the agenda? We feel like we have adequate direction.
Just
David?
one quick point of clarification. So you were talking about urban services boundary versus urban growth boundary. Do we have a decision on what we want to do there?
Interest. Can I say interest?
Yeah.
If you had like the world's foremost leader on economic development move outside that boundary, and they came to City Hall and said, Stan, I want to be on this committee. Can I please? And we go, no, I'm sorry, you can't. I'm sure we'd probably change the rule. So let's just make it as flexible as we can. So if there's interest, because we are not packing the house on any of the other committees. So I think we open the door as wide as we can.
Can I give an example? And a perfect example is on the Sandy Net board. We had a gentleman that lives down Bluff about 4 miles on there, but he's on the Sandy Net board, but he's also the appointed person of staff for the state of Oregon on broadband. So it made it to be the foremost kind of this, information that we were just blessed to have, and so all the time. And so I think that comes back to the point of, they're right outside, but in that case, it was within service area of Sandy Net because you can do this whole wireless thing, but the point being, it was just a couple miles outside, but yet
he was who I was thinking about when I.
Oh yeah.
Well, we do have checks and balances. That's an important point,
Yeah.
right? It's the appointment at the beginning.
Comes back here.
It comes back here to council,
Yep.
right?
Yep,
So.
exactly.
Yes.
Exactly.
Okay, so I'm hearing
Anywhere.
whatever's most permissible.
Stay out of Chicago.
Cool.
Unless they're really,
and University Place, Washington.
Or if you happen to know a developer who just happens to have a couple $1 million to invest in building an office building, that'd be great too.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, conflict of interest.
Yeah. All right, so moving on, request for exemption from underground requirement in section 178480E. Looks like, Mike Tucker.
So, there is a provision in the code that the staff has always interpreted to mean that no overhead utility facilities without an exemption. The code is pretty clear on this. And so, we just didn't feel comfortable in telling somebody, yeah, go ahead. And I think we've done these in the past for like the Frontier or Verizon, whatever it was at the time. So these are pretty few and far between. And the big issue is, the city spent a lot of money. This is on Proctor Boulevard. The city spent a lot of money 10 years ago to put most of the power infrastructure underground, all of the phone and all of the cable TV underground. And so, before we told PG, yeah, sure, no problem, we wanted to kind of get a read from the city council on this. PG gave us a very detailed explanation on how this works. And this is the simplified version of the detailed explanation. The other one had a lot of equations, and I won't go into that. But anyway, they did send a picture that I think I could have done better if I had taken when I was driving by. But anyway, this is some off of Google Earth, and this kind of gives you an idea of the size, even though this appears to be from Pioneer Boulevard. But that's kind of the size of the wire, and they weren't clear on whether it was going to be right next to the existing wire or a little above it or below it on the other side, or they couldn't really provide that information. But it's really up to you on what you want to do with this. It's just that we didn't feel comfortable in saying, yeah, go ahead, without running it by council.
What's the future of these lines that they're looking at? I mean, are we going to have those there for the foreseeable future?
Yeah, given that probably the only source of funding to do any significant undergrounding is urban renewal, and that's spoken for the next 20 years, if not longer. So maybe they'll have some new, yet unthought of or undreamt of way of transmitting electricity by the time we have enough money to put these on the ground.
Councilor Exner?
Yeah, it looks like in their description down here, that you're right, it was a little bit confusing, but it appears as if they're saying, and help me to understand that that's true or not, that putting this wire in the ground inside our pipes would be unsafe.
Well, I think what
Is that right?
we said, when we paid PG to put a lot of this stuff under the ground.
Right.
We said, tell us how many conduits you need for the future, and they said put in 6 or 8 or whatever's out there. And the explanation, so that was the question we asked, and they said, well, this was the explanation we got back. These were installed or for new service lines for new customers. So, I don't know whether it's for the main line or for the branches going to the individual businesses, but that was their response.
So short story is, it's not, or it is okay to put it in the ground?
I never got a definitive answer saying, it's impossible, you couldn't do this because it's unsafe, or I think this is more code for it'd be really expensive.
Oh, is that what it is?
All right, we'll go Councilor Hamlin, Councilor Petzold, and Councilor Lee.
So, Mike, I wasn't shocked when I read your report, but I did catch your pun in there.
Yeah, I saw that too.
Yeah.
So
Took me
a
a
couple
while.
of things actually. When I saw this on the agenda, I live in a neighborhood where all of our power is buried underground, and I have not realized how much I've appreciated that. And then actually driving through town and seeing all the power lines, and if we do have those moments of a view of Mount Hood, how hideous those things can be. So I do think I would love to see us moving in a direction of fewer approved above ground. That said, my concern comes from if there are weather related or power disruption. My understanding has always been underground seems to be a little more stable or protected from disruption or power failures versus the above ground lines. And if this is a main point of contact throughout town, if that's cause for more disruption being overhead.
Yeah, again, you know, they didn't really provide a lot of detail on this. I get the impression that the neutral doesn't do anything, doesn't connect any dwellings or businesses. It just it provides a path for the current in case there's a fault between, you know, the high voltage lines and the substation or between two substations. I mean, we could have them come back and say, you know, or send something back that you could review, you know, and provide more detail on this. Just tell them, you know, we can say we couldn't get a decision because you didn't provide enough detail. That's easy to go back to them.
And there's
I
no
would like
staff
more
recommendation either. So.
Right, yeah.
Councilor Peetzel?
Yeah, you know, from being on the council right after that was approved for the undergrounding, so it's been 12 years or more when that happened, was a lot of the view. And so the picture before and after. Thank you for the clarification that they showed the line on Pioneer, but it's actually over on Proctor. So a couple questions: is this neutral line for the high voltage pieces up there, or is this more for the lower lines? You can see in that same picture that you have the high voltage on the top of those poles, which they said that you could never go underground.
The primary, yeah, right.
Or it'd be so expensive because of the high voltage underground. And then below it, you have what they've continued with. Is this neutral for that high voltage?
I think the neutral's kind of, you know, there's so much stuff overhead. I think it's just any place they can fit it on the pole. They have internal policies or standards for how high on the pole or how close to other lines these things can be. And so maybe, I think that's just the only criteria is that's the only place they have on the poles to put it.
So if they're upgrading this neutral, are they going to take the other neutral down?
No, this is an one in addition to the
so this is not just
existing.
an upgrade. This is an
Right.
additional neutral, additional line on there. And then, do we know if this is going to be serving outside the city limits of Sandy to the east there? Because they may sound for future developments, but and I'm all for keeping, you know, having that power there so we can develop. We have the flexibility and everything. I don't want to hinder that, but that came to mind as well, because in your thing saying a lot of our power comes from Eagle Creek.
Yeah, the way it was explained to me is that part of the demand in Sandy was served by a substation in Eagle Creek, and then they, you know, a year or two ago they upgraded the Sandy substation, and then so it's no longer necessary for Sandy to be fed by the Eagle Creek substation, and this is necessary to get us off of the Eagle Creek substation. Everybody in Sandy on the Sandy substation.
And then one last,
because there's going to be more current on the Proctor side.
Then one last one was PGE came to us here a few years ago. I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago, about putting fiber between all the pole. I guess that wasn't PGE. I apologize. That was ODOT. They were just going to string that up, and we said, no, wait, we have this underground. No, we're just going to string this up. No. But we have conduit. We'll let you put it in the conduit, and we have fiber there already going up there, because it was better to our livability of our community with all those traffic lights there. But, you know, we've already come back and said, no, we're not going to do that. And we've put all this infrastructure in place so that didn't happen. Now, that was based off of communication lines, and I thought that the process was written around communications had to be buried, but power didn't for the downtown couplet to couplet. So, but
yeah, I mean, I think the most disappointing thing about this is this is a problem we always have with PG. You know, you can't put things overhead in Sandy. We're always getting these things. We're finding out after the fact, or they get a new person that does the design, and we find out, let's kind of re-educate the new person. And so, all of this could have been avoided perhaps if they had come to us early in the process and said, this is a problem we're trying to solve. But I didn't find out about this until the ODOT permit came in. And, there's a local government checkoff on the ODOT permit. So that's the only way we knew about it.
Oh, wow.
Councilor Lee?
Yes, what I was wondering about is, first of all, we need to have them come and answer our questions directly, but secondly, if we let them do that, could it be a temporary use until we decide to do something else with that pool?
Yeah, you could put any conditions on it. I think if you want to grant the exemption, you could say it's good for 10 years or it's good until...
I think she was thinking more like 3 weeks.
No, this would be a permanent facility unless, told otherwise.
Yeah. Hey, Councilor Exner?
Yeah, not being on the council as long as Jeremy has been, I was on the planning commission when this thing was put up. And I remember us talking about just how many lines we needed, how many tubes and pipes and so on to meet all of their requirements, and putting as much down in there as possible. And I didn't hear any complaints that there would be any future requirements to do something like this. And I have to say, after going through all of that, and we spent a considerable amount of money in doing that with our urban renewal dollars, spent a lot of money. And I would say, unless they can tell me that this, and prove to me that this is really impossible, I would say there's no way. We've already worked this out. We've talked to them through it. They've given us their best bet. Boy, I'm really not in favor of this at all.
Okay. Councilor Smollett?
Well, I was just going to add to that, I don't really feel comfortable in making a decision without more information. This to me is way too vague, and in order to make a decision for the best outcome for the citizens, I don't think that they've provided enough information. So I would like more information.
Yeah, and that's what we told them. We said,
yeah,
the outcome you get will be based on the amount of information you provide.
Fair.
Not equations.
So,
I hear you.
Or equations.
Jordan, I'm feeling a consensus to table this for the time being and to gather more information back. Can we skip the vote, or do we need to vote to table it?
Probably want to vote to table, so just deny
Motion
the
to
request.
table it.
Second.
Yeah.
Been a motion to table it by Councilor Hamlin, dual second. So I'll go with Councilor Smallwood. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion to table for more additional information in the future carries. Next item on the agenda is proposals for utility rate model and wastewater SDCs update.
Right, this is something we've been meaning to do for quite some time. We've had a rate model, but it kind of started falling apart about 5 or 6 years ago. Too many people were getting in there and tweaking it, and a lot of people had access to it, and the current version is kind of unworkable. And it was always pretty cumbersome to use. It was very data entry intensive. We're trying to kind of streamline. It was a lot of work to provide a very small increment in resolution. So we'd like to get something that maybe might be a little less granular, but still provides us with the information we need. And it's a model we use annually when we look at the rates. We plug in revenue, expenses, and it guides us when we make a recommendation to the council for changes to the. This would only be for the water and sewer utilities. And so we asked for some proposals, and we also need to update our wastewater SDCs now that we're looking at a new treatment facility. So we solicited proposals. We got 4 responses. They're summarized in this table. There was we had 2 proposals kind of grouped around the $22,000 to $25,000 range, and 2 proposals at $44,000 to $49,000. So we had Tyler Deems, Jordan, and myself ranked these independently, put all the scores together, and this was the highest ranked proposal was from FCS Group. We've worked with them in the past. They did our transportation and parks SDCs. They do a lot of this work, and they've done some of it for Sandy, but they do a lot of it all over the Pacific Northwest, and we've always been pleased with the quality of work that they provided us.
Okay, discussion, Councilor Peitzel.
Couple questions. Your comment is everyone keeps getting in there for the last 5 years and tweaking it. What was that all about?
Well, there weren't, that's the other thing too, there weren't a lot of protected features in the existing rate model where people, there was nothing to prevent people from getting in. The finance director would get in there, the city manager would get in there, I'd get in there, and maybe some people were a little more confident in their Excel skills, and wouldn't it be nice if it would do this? And there was no tracking of who made changes or anything like that. So that's one thing we asked for in the proposal, that this thing would be a little more secure. We wouldn't have people tweaking it
Like a PDF?
But
Still won't be able to update it.
So the other question is why are we not looking at also storm? Because we haven't raised or looked at that fee since the inception of it.
Right. Well, storm's pretty easy. Storm is, it's not based on customer class. We have different rates for commercial and residential and multifamily and single family and the water and sewer utilities. Storm is just strictly based on impervious surface, and it's pretty simple as far as, what are the capital needs, what are the operations needs, and what's the revenue we've got. And storm's in a lot better shape than either water or sewer as far as rate revenue.
I'm just cautious because we haven't touched that one since the inception of it, and so we get in our same little.
Well, we added like a 25 cents per equivalent residential unit, I think about, and maybe it's 2014 or 15, somewhere in there.
Anyway, so anyway.
It's been a while.
Any other discussion? I guess we're looking for a motion to accept the proposal from FCS Group and authorize the city manager to negotiate scope of work and fee not to exceed $50,000 and enter into an agreement with FCS Group for updating the utility rate model and wastewater systems development charges.
Make a motion of what you said.
Second that motion.
All right, we've got a motion of this. Carrie, you know what I said, from Councilor Peitzel, and a second from Councilor Hamlin. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next item, City Manager's Report. Jordan Wheeler.
Yeah.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you,
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah, and thanks, Mike, for his work on the one of our big transitions that hopefully nobody really knows about. I guess knows about, but maybe doesn't feel, right? So, wastewater treatment plant went from one operator to the other on Friday, March 1st, and I think the toilets are flushing and the water is being treated. So, no news is usually good news, but things are going well. Veolia is our new operator for our wastewater treatment plant. On that subject, I did receive the official notice of fines from DEQ for the permit violations 2017, 2018, about $24,000 worth of fines there. So timely that we were switching operators at the same time, and of course addressing a lot of the deficiencies and permit issues with our wastewater facilities plan. We, as I mentioned before, we're deep in the budget process internally. Departments are working on their budget worksheets, projecting their revenues and expenses, and your input and kind of comments today are helpful, and we have a lot ahead of us to bring back to you and have some good conversations at the budget committee. I've had some conversations with individual counselors about that first budget committee meeting and where it falls. We're still trying to land on a meeting date that makes sense for everybody. I think at this point, we're looking at early May, and possibly May 13th as a replacement for your normally scheduled work session. I know it adds meetings to your already aggressive schedule, and so if there's a way that we can maybe replace one of those work sessions or something with a budget committee meeting, it takes a little bit of the load off.
I have a question there. Will that give us enough time to get through the several meetings that we need to have with that? Because sometimes we normally have started in April, if I recall. I mean, department heads would probably remember that more accurately than me, but I thought we'd start in April to give us, because sometimes it goes into another meeting and then we run out of time.
Yes, ideally, I would love to start in April. I think we have some vacation conflicts. There's some schedule things that we're trying to pull off with the wastewater facilities plan around that time. So I can definitely look at dates and moving it up to late April. The other option is just continue into May, and we bring back for council adoption of the budget in late July. You know, we need to get it wrapped up before, late June. We need to wrap it up before July 1st. But it's sort of how we, like, tonight was kind of important to know what the topics are. We might have 2 or 3 meetings, so.
Squish them together.
Yeah, there might be a week where we have 2 meetings or something if we need that, second and third budget committee meeting.
So my concern there, we've had continuous conversations about our pace and how much we have going right now, but I would like to avoid a here's the budget rubber stamp meeting from council. The schedule you're proposing does make me a little nervous about that.
Okay.
Councilor Exner?
And in my mind too, this is not going to be a typical year. We have a lot of big questions on the board, and I think for us to trade off ease of our evenings for fewer meetings, I think it'd be uncomfortable for me. I think we need to be careful about it. I wanted to spend one more night at it if I had to make sure we do it right.
I totally agree. I felt, I just leave it at that.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. Yeah, I'll look for some dates in April and start those meetings.
Councilor Exner?
In that regard, I understand we've got a split decision about our planning commission for one more night. Is that right? We've got 2 that are going to make it a one night, and then we're going to have one more the following.
Yeah, I was going to address that in my report.
Is that timely now, or if we can find a way not to make that an extra night?
Another interview.
Yeah, I don't want to take your.
Oh, well, it's not like a big item, but yay,
Well, we're just talking about evenings. I'm thinking myself.
Yeah, Carrie and I had a conversation on that earlier. Darn it, why did somebody have to back out? It's a toughie because Planning Commission, we're one of the top fastest growing communities in Oregon, right? So they need to fill that seat. We've held them up. We have, right? We've held them up because we wanted to have more say on it. So this individual, I don't know if you have viewed the resumes or not, but she's a good candidate, right? And so it's just, do we say the conversation between Carrie and I this morning was do we say, well, that was the designated time? Sorry, or do we allow for an additional meeting night? And so that's kind of, we left it, Carrie and I were both kind of struggling, and then Carrie kind of sent it back out to everybody to see what would work if we did do an additional night. I'm open for additional thoughts. Quite frankly, we were struggling with it this morning.
I don't know. I don't know if that takes the whole council to make that decision or not, or just the people that were on that committee. So I'd say maybe we could pull that offline.
Yeah.
So we don't extend for council. If somebody doesn't show up the night that we're doing interviews, we don't do an extension to another week. So we've moved right on through the list. Same thing with Arts Commission or Arts Committee as well too, so that they don't arrive. It's a nice courtesy, but we don't have the liberty for much courtesy.
So to Councilor Peetzel's point, I hear that. Look, we'll take it offline, but totally valid point.
Yeah. I'd like to see them all participate as much as possible, but I just feeling like you say, I think everybody's feeling the pinch for all the meetings. And to have one more that really we should have had on one
So
night.
to be honest, I didn't know how I was going to communicate it back to my wife. so now I'm just going to say Carl got us out of it.
Make me the bad guy.
Lucy's watching. I don't know about your wife. I'd watch out for your daughter.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. All right. Sorry, Jordan. Carry on.
Oh, that's okay. Some progress towards the council goal. The transportation system plan has a kickoff meeting this week internally with ODOT and reviewing, I think, proposals pretty soon on consultants to help kick that off. So looking forward to getting that started. And then just a bit of, I guess it's sad news for the city, absolutely, but happy for Mr. Joe Knapp, who submitted his resignation. He and his family are moving on to some great things. But he's done such great work with the city. He's going to be terribly missed, and we wish him well. But it's a big loss. He's got a great team in place. He's left a great legacy, so we're in good shape. But we will miss Joe, and his last day is going to be March 22nd, and I think he even has a week in there where he's not around. So the days are really counting down at this point. But if you see him, wish him well.
Okay. All right. Oh, absolutely.
A question. We always have this link at the bottom that says monthly reports, and it links to some reports in August of last year. Should we either have reports or get rid of it?
One of these days, they will be all up. When you click on that, it just popped me up to a 2011 report. So I think there's some updating we can do with that. But for the most part, the departments are updating those reports on at least a monthly basis with information that isn't really at that council report level, but just here's what things are going on in our department. Yes, feedback I've heard a couple times now is we need those updated and more often.
So let me give you an example. I don't like hearing that there's been a permit application from a large chain coffee dealer on Facebook, right? Like that should be in a monthly report. Like that's what we're hoping to have those for.
Yeah, some of that's just timing. If we're doing the reports on monthly or bi-monthly,
right.
That that hit the news from that business.
Literally,
they submitted the application,
boom. Right?
And they were just faster than we were.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
But yeah, I understand that dilemma.
Okay. All right, moving on. We are to council and committee reports. Councilor Schultz.
Yeah, I haven't had any more library meetings yet. Did want to just shout out that I appreciated the collaboration last week with the Parks Board. I felt like Parks Board put a lot of work into that joint session, especially Kathleen with her slides. Thought that was super informative for folks that haven't been around or don't know some of the terminology involved with our park system. And then some of us attended the Anna Williams constituent breakfast yesterday, and I just wanted to say that I appreciate the work that Mayor Pulliam has done in keeping us on her radar. It was very obvious that we are indeed on her radar, her and her offices in Salem. So I thought that was good to see, and I like to see that being well attended with some good questions and feedback from people that live here and people on our council.
Thank you. Councilor Exner.
Three things. I got a call from a previous councilor, actually, who made a phone call late in the evening about one of our pump stations that was flashing red and in dire problems. And this previous councilor said it took like up to 5 or 6 minutes for some sort of response back from the message machine. So it doesn't sound like it was very responsive. She felt like she wanted to hang up a couple times, but it just took a long time. And
is this the number on the pump station?
yeah, it's the 5533 number, and I don't know if it's just struggling or just having some difficulties or whatever that might be. If you could look into that for me. The other thing, real quick, kind of in the agenda for what we talked about a little bit, is I looked at the website for whatever reason that look at some of the committee responsibilities. I notice I'm still on C4. And there's a few other things in there that we've made decisions on and that should be corrected.
Yeah.
Not my highest priority in the world, but if you see things on the internet, absolutely true, right? Everything there is positively.
That's what they say.
Okay, enough of that. Forestry Code meeting, we did meet for the first time. I have to say I'm really impressed by the diversity in there. We just got a real good crew of folks on the developer side, on the environmental side, on the planning commission. It just really has a good feel for it. We did have some problems because the planning department is overwhelmed. And so it may be a while before we get a chance to look at that again. But one of the things that we did decide is that, and this will be coming to council relatively soon, planning department is struggling with getting all their things done. They want to, with some guidance from me and one of the other committee members, I'd like to see some direction from council about how we put the sideboards on that committee a little bit. There were some big questions about it. And you'll be seeing those. I don't want to go into detail about that now, but there was some desire to see us narrowed into a place where we could be effective and respond back quickly as we could. So you'll be seeing that brought forward from Kelly within the next few weeks, probably. The Art Commission met also last 2 weeks ago now, and they're heavily into looking at the current inventory, looking at repair needs, looking at the kind of stuff that is out there, not just in the public art, but there's a number of places where we have private art too, that those people who do have private art would like to see it at least on an inventory. They have their own thoughts about keeping it safe, secure, and displayed and so on, but it's good to have at least an inventory of it. Don't know what the future might be in those private art categories that are open to the public, but they also are interested. I understand we're going to do our facade work on the City Hall this next biennium. There was some discussion about what to do with the art on the outside and on the inside of the building. There may be some fix-ups, certainly on the outside. The outside mural really needs some watch. I look at that and I see moss growing and lots of the paints are starting to drool, and certainly we've gone through the preservative of that. So,
George, what is our timeline on some of these facade updates
On City Hall? Or on the?
On City Hall.
Yeah. Some of the work is actually in progress. So there's several different components to it. A lot of it is kind of maintenance stuff, electrical, plumbing, and then I think we're still exploring bigger facade moves for the external part of the building. But there's some ADA issues and David, you're still here.
This is actually my project. So, we've. I just actually talked to Columbia Cascade today. They are in the process of ordering windows for us, starting today. So we're hoping to see the majority of this work done to City Hall before the end of this biennium.
So
actually,
I'm not looking for a big discussion on this, but it is a reason why I do want to have our urban renewal work session before too long to set priorities, because we have had a couple of offline conversations about how quickly our community is growing and the different services and what's going to happen with the community campus, and SandyNet currently operates out of there. I mean, we are nowhere near touching a conversation yet of a new City Hall. That said, it makes me nervous to spend money if there could potentially be a project in the next 4 or 5 years of a full tear down reconstruction. Again, I'm not looking to really get something in the back of my mind as we're having this conversation.
Those are the first thoughts I had too when I learned of the project, and this was something budgeted in this current biennium. But a lot of the work is repair and maintenance that is pretty needed, regardless if we're in this building for 4 or 5 years, and for starting a project, even considering a project in 4 or 5 years, we're talking about a new City Hall, and
you would know
we're talking 5 to 10 years, right, or beyond. So this is leaking windows. This is stuff that on a day where it rains pretty hard, Tyler and I are putting cups up to catch the rainwater. Electrical safety issues, and I guess I can say this publicly. SandyNet's located here, so that is a significant investment that we want to protect and make sure that the building is not leaking and it's appropriately secured and the electrical is updated and maintained. So I think it's worth some investment to keep this building operational for the time being.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, there's some safety issues too. I know that our entrances have got a lot of broken tile and rock. We certainly don't want to have unsafe things there. So that's it for me.
Councilor Lee.
Yes, I also was at Anna Williams' event. I was really surprised that there was such a great turnout, more than 50 people. She was very responsive to the questions, and I think everyone who attended learned something new. The plastic bags bill is going to the House floor very shortly, so I think we're going to have a plastic bags law statewide. What else? C4 is meeting Thursday this week, so I don't really have any update on that. They've just been following the metro housing and the transportation projects, and we're hoping to get more into the meat of that in the near future. So I think that was about it. The city dinner at Happy Valley was a great event. I think there were, what, 4 of us that were there, perhaps? But we better put up some gates between here and Happy Valley because they're growing fast.
Yeah.
Have plans to take over Clackamas County on the northern end. Go from, what was it? I can't remember what they had. 22,000 to 50,000.
50,000.
Yeah. Just, I think, another reason why we need to start our planning process, because if we don't do it, someone will make sure to do it for us. Yeah. Councilor Hamlin.
Nothing to report.
Councilor Smollett.
Haven't had any Parks meetings. Have one coming up at the end of this month. I would also like to extend a big thank you to the Parks board for the energy and effort that they put in, especially you, Kathleen. Thanks so much. It was very informative. Also, a big thank you to everybody that was involved in getting the grant moving forward for Jonsrud. Saw that went through, so that's fantastic. And looking forward just working on the master plan for the parks coming up. Hoping, if you guys don't know Timberline Lodge, I realize that's not in Sandy, but is put is put the first part of their mountain bike trail system in. It will open August 1st, and so that's just for this year. They have a second and a third phase that will open up in the preceding years or the years after that. It would be really cool in that master plan if we could get some mountain bike trails, because you could see with the economic development, some tourism here, tying in. You could ride in Sandy, you can ride at Sandy Ridge, and you can ride at Timberline Lodge, and then I think that would be really cool moving forward. So we'll see what comes of that.
Hey, whether it's a Sandy or not, please keep those updates coming, because it has dramatic impacts on not just economic development, but traffic,
Absolutely.
Lots of things that affect us.
Yep.
So absolutely.
Yep.
We'll have bike traffic coming through, man.
We will, absolutely.
Yeah,
And it's pretty cool.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool. So you're going to be able to take the lifts up and then ride down. It's not a downhill trail, but it's definitely going to see a lot of traffic. So
Very cool.
Councilor Peetzel.
Yeah, again, I mean, a lot of people have echoed this, but I want to do it as well. Thank you, Kathleen, for the Parks Board, and a great slide deck that you had and the history behind that. I know you from being on with you on the Parks Board there for a long time. I know how much time you've put into that and the beginning of the Parks Board. It's great to have you on board there. The Happy Valley dinner was great, and so I get to geek out. I don't know about you guys, but I go home at night sometimes from these meetings and I just stare at the map of Sandy and look at this. So this is the type, I know it sounds weird, but this is the type of meeting that was really beneficial and just kind of dreaming for Happy Valley, because we know about them as their sister community, but then what that brings to our community too. And one of those things was the traffic. And I got up afterwards and asked the guys about the traffic headed east, and they're like, well, we don't really care about what goes east. I'm like, no, wait a minute, this road is going the sunrise corridor. You know, they just kind of ended it right at their end. Well, we didn't plan for anything further than that, even though they're annexing in so much of Damascus. 50,000 people, putting a new river walk down on the Clackamas River, and then also putting a whole new civic downtown area out in the Pleasant Valley area. So over 1,000 acres were annexed into their community in the last couple of years. Adding 50,000 people will have a drastic change for us here, commercially, or people working there and living here, or you know, all those type of things. So it will add traffic, as Stan was pointing out, and so, but also getting through that to get back home if we work in those areas out there in the metro
connect
area.
the bypass to the Sunrise Corridor, all of a sudden you got the Mount Hood Expressway. just saying.
Yeah. So, anyways, it was a good. I recommend the city dinners for a lot of reasons. For those new counselors and staff to make sure that that's something you can attend to. Anna Williams meeting. Thank you, Stan, for putting that out there and getting her here. I guess it was her first meeting out there as a elected official, town hall meeting or whatever
And so there were a lot of kids there, a lot of kids on iPads, mine included, but you know, they were there learning what it's about to listen, and feedback from our community, some great questions in there that we got to hear. And I think it says a lot about our council, with 4 of us being there that day. It was even brought up by her as well as Stan there, because we have serious needs in our community.
Yes.
And she has been listening to those needs when we went down for City Day as well, and coming up here, driving up here in a snowstorm or rainy storm or whatever it was that day, to turn around and go back, making that commitment for Sandy and hearing our needs, whether it's traffic or sewer, you know, all the sexy stuff. So I also was in Salem on Thursday at OBAC, Oregon Broadband Advisory Council, that I'm the vice chair of for the state of Oregon. And afterwards, we went over to the session there, and they had got to sit up there and represent the reports to the state on the Oregon Broadband Advisory Council and the champion, Broadband Champion, which we've been a participant of, myself included, for around the state of Oregon. Got to present that, as also looking for the bills on creating a broadband office for the state of Oregon that's going forward. And so Sandy has had a big influence in that, as we keep being that model that people look back to, as look what they did in Sandy. So little Sandy, Oregon has quite a broad stretch when it comes to that internet around the state of Oregon. So.
Cool. Well, this one's short. Well, not really short, but short for me. Committees, Clackamas County Coordinating Committee C4. Councilor Lee mentioned this Thursday. Last time I gave the report for these guys, I mentioned the vehicle registration fee that they were looking to vote. They did vote. They passed it. So $30 additional vehicle registration fee. I know that definitely comes into the equation with some of the conversations we've had about how we could potentially finance the Bell Street 362nd connection. I have heard rumblings of a potential repeal effort on that. So
it's underway already.
Yeah, it's underway already. It sounds like it's pretty easy to get on the county ballot, as opposed to what you have to do hurdles you have to overcome on the state. And so eyes wide open. Our community or Clackamas County has denied 9 previous gas taxes. So, and there could be a lot of stuff on the ballot this time. So we're just going to have to wait and see there. This Thursday, for the Sandy Mountain Festival, we have a meeting with Martin Montgomery and a few of their committee members. We're going to go rope into that Andy Howell with Transit, Mike Walker from Public Works, and then Officer Lundry from the Police Department. These are the 3 kind of different facets of our local government here that have a part with the Mountain Festival, whether it's police, doing the monitoring, and transit, getting people around, and then of course the big portion of it takes place in Mine Lake Park with our public work. So it's trying to coordinate for that. Just wanted to thank Kathleen as well for the Parks meeting. That was an outstanding meeting we had last week. I hope we provided some clarity. I wanted to thank Councilor Lori Smallwood for the greatest event to hit Sandy that never happened, where we were organized for our boys varsity team. We're doing some great things, darn it, and they almost made the state tournament for the first time in a really long time. And it's we're a quickly growing community, but we're still a community, right? And we can do some neat things like that still. So let's keep our eye out. I had the volleyball team did some awesome stuff this year, and they made state and almost made it to the finals. So let's keep our eyes out for those opportunities and kind of provide our community with some cool stuff that can happen. League of Oregon Cities magazine that came out featured our new fire station and kind of how we uniquely use our urban renewal dollars. And there's a lot of arguments that happen between city municipalities and special districts, and we've been unique in the way in which we have partnered and been able to make things happen. And so I saw that, was going to report on it, and then we went to the city day. When I go to the city dinner, and it started making me think, and I sent Councilor Peetzel to comment, talked to you earlier, it'd be neat when it's our turn. Maybe we have it at the. We're always looking for the right venue. That could be a really neat venue for us to talk about our partnership with special districts and how we used our urban renewal dollars and our future plans with urban renewal dollars. So let's keep that in the back of mind. Could be neat. Had a lunch, a few of us, with Congressman Blumenauer that I thought went really well. He's going to look to champion our efforts on wastewater treatment. It sounds like he has a bill he's going to reintroduce for investment at the federal level. And he shared some great ideas on how to engage with some of our community students and different schools. It was a neat meeting. Jordan, Mike Walker, and I met with Ray Armitage of Senator Ron Wyden's office. Very encouraging. You know, it's a lot of it is you pray and hope certain things happen, but there could be some opportunities at the national level on infrastructure projects that could involve wastewater that we could get tied into. One thing that Congressman Blumenauer said on that is, while $60 million seems like a whole lot of money to us, the fact that it doesn't have a B, as in billion, doesn't make it too scary for the federal folks. And we're kind of that little community that could, and we're on the map thanks to a lot of, like, you know, Sandy Net. We talk a lot about Councilor Peetzold and going around these national conferences and talking, and we talk about that in terms of Sandy Net. We don't always talk about what that means for wastewater, right? And what it can mean for transportation by having the reputation that we have out there. So that work really, I think, pays off in a lot of different ways. On wastewater treatment, Councilor Extra and I met with leadership of Sandy Watershed Council, and I think we got to continue to look for opportunities to team up and where we can on that project, especially with some different alternatives. Their big motto is to think outside the pipe, and I think we need to. And we need to, you know, we have a great consulting firm, but we've got to. I thought the best part of that community forum that we had was afterwards. We looked up. And Mike was over here with them. They were looking at the map, right? And they were kind of thinking and looking at Roslyn Lake and thinking big picture on stuff. And so let's continue that. And let's tour different facilities and be proactive. 60 Million is a huge project for us. So let's make sure we do it right. We've not had internet service in the past. We've gotten crummy transportation from TriMet in the past. And we created SAM, our own transit. And we created our own ISP. Let's use that same pioneer spirit when it comes to our wastewater and really encourage our staff to do that as well. I'd like to thank Councilors Peetzold, Schultz, and Lee for attending Representative Williams' forum with me. That relationship's very key for us. It's been a long time since we've had someone in the majority party representing us in Salem. We got news back that was in a report from Jordan that we're getting our wastewater, our first phase, our I&I, and some improvements for our current facilities. They asked for a budget note for Speaker Kotek's budget. So that could have some real financial significant impact for us. Let's not get too excited, though, about what's going on at the state and federal level. We got to look at the fees and start building that up so that we don't just have one big fee increase for our citizens, but we've got some really good advocacy efforts going there. I mentioned this to you earlier, Jordan, school zone, and some people on council might have some past history for me on this. I had a teacher reach out to me. You're driving down Bluff by the high school, and you've, well, what used to be the high school, Cedar Ridge Middle School, and you got the football fields and stuff on the left-hand side, and our buses and stuff park over there. Mm-hmm. There's a end of school zone sign, and then the crosswalk where the kids are crossing back and forth. Is there...
Are you talking the far end, or are you talking the end up close to the ridge?
What's the reasoning behind
Mike
that?
might have it better, because I brought this up after the change of the high school, and then he was giving some common sense to me about why the sidewalk is where it was at, and because we were like, put back that sidewalk or that crosswalk because it wasn't. We had to move it to the other side. And
you know, it's always easier to have crosswalk at an intersection, and that's where it works there. But the school zones are, it's like the speed limits. Cities don't just say put a sign here, put a sign there. You have to go through this speed zone investigation process. And that was the established school speed limit zone from when the high school was there. So rather than go through another investigation, when the middle school went in, we said, let's just put the signs in the same place that had already been approved. as a school zone. So that's why they're there. I mean, we could do it, we could reinvestigate it, but I don't know if the outcome would be different or the same.
What's that left? I mean, is it a pretty big?
It takes a long time, you have to go through ODOT, and.
Oh, so it just happened then?
Right, yeah, so we'd have to do an investigation, submit to ODOT, they make a decision and see, but again, you know, ODOT's a large organization and it's difficult to, go against the status quo, so.
Okay.
You know, so, but we could do it, there's no doubt that we could do an investigation, see what we can come up with.
Well, back of mind, but interesting. Okay. I have an answer now, though. Thank you. I appreciate that. Finishing up, Councilor Pete Sold and Exner and I are going to have these planning commission interviews tomorrow night. Sounds like only tomorrow night. We are hosting the rescheduled chamber event this Wednesday morning.
Unless it snows.
It will happen, but there is snow on the calendar. I know.
I showed up here. I was thinking, go back.
Right
here.
Yeah, just put a note on the door if it's not going to happen.
That's at 7.
Oh, yeah, we all get here and there's no
So it's the morning perk this Wednesday, council chamber, 7:30 a.m. We go with the school district schedule. Okay, so we let that out there, but if they're on a 2-hour delay, then we're not having it. If they're canceled, we're not having it. Okay, so that's how
Stan,
that works.
you
Is
said
that correct, Chris?
That is correct.
You said the planning interviews, you said tomorrow, but are they Wednesday?
Wednesday night.
No,
tomorrow night.
Tomorrow night?
Oh, tomorrow night. Okay. I'm sure that's what my calendar says. In my mind, it was Wednesday.
That's tomorrow.
Tomorrow night.
Tomorrow
We're
night.
good. We're good.
Okay.
Just one.
Counselors, ribbon cutting this Sunday, March 10th, 2 p.m. at the Beauty Room. Everybody's invited to participate if you'd like. Beauty Room's right next to your office, right next to the chamber office there in that library parking lot. Okay. And then finally, next Monday, March 11th, will be our next work session. This is an important one as OPSIS will come in and report, provides her report on the Sandy Community campus. And I just want to end on one note. You know, we ask staff a lot of questions and we try to be pretty transparent and candor, and sometimes that can come out negative. Just like a quick update, we're like 2 months into Jordan's stay, and a lot of us as counselors, we have an aggressive agenda, but if you think about what our goals were in wastewater and getting to that kind of phase 1, developing a communications plan with it, we're there. Provide the community with a plan on the aquatic center and the community campus. I mean, that's March, right? And so budget financing and doing it strategically, we'll look at what our work session was on, and we're starting to hit into our budget cycle. I mean, we're doing a lot of really good things, and we're getting through a whole lot. And I'm incredibly pleased with the work that you and your team are doing, Jordan. So thanks a lot for everything that you guys.
Positive that. You bet.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And that's my report.
We got something. If you're going on Sunday, it's the time change.
Yeah, don't forget.
Remember that?
Yeah.
About the ribbon cutting.
That's right.
Time change on Sunday.
It's the beginning of March.
So staff updates, we've talked about that. One thing I wanted to say, community service department, I mentioned that in our work session, like awesome job on that update. They're doing some really, I need to become a senior in this community and do some of the things they're doing. It's pretty.
You'll get your day will come.
Yeah.
Your day will come.
Yeah, it's cool. And then David, I put you on the spot. I had a question on your report. You mentioned the Smith building. There's what building is that? And there's 3 owners, and there's some confusion or something.
Yeah, that's the
Studebaker.
Oh, so that is the Smith building.
Yeah, that's the
Now I knew of 2 of the owners. I knew there were 2 owners. There's a 3rd owner in that. Is that what your report said?
No, there's only 2 that I know of.
I'm aware of just 2 is all.
Okay, all right. It's just that's all I knew of. So I wanted to make sure. Okay.
Yeah, no, technically the historical name for it is a Smith building, but it's more commonly known as a student.
Yeah, I agree. Okay. That's all I had. Any other staff reports? Just talked about it. All right, that's it. We adjourn. Thank you, everybody.
Okay.
I think Carl did.